Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again in today's story. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to my channel. My name is Emma Davis, and I'm 29 years old. The $980,000 house my grandmother left me was supposed to be my sanctuary. Instead, it became the stage for the most painful betrayal of my life. My father forgot to hang up the phone that day. "She's just a burden," he said to my mother. Not knowing, I heard every word they were enjoying Europe on my dime while plotting to take my home, so I made a decision. When they returned, smiling with souvenirs, their key didn't fit the lock anymore. The house was empty, and my note simply read, "Surprise, a burden did this." Before I share how it all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took you for granted. Growing up, money was always tight in our household. My parents, Robert and Diana Davis, worked multiple jobs just to keep our small rental home and put food on the table. Dad was a factory worker with a perpetual chip on his shoulder about missed opportunities, while Mom juggled part-time receptionist positions. Despite their financial struggles, they never let me forget that every dollar spent on me was a dollar they couldn't spend on themselves. My grandmother Elizabeth was different, while my parents saw only limitations. Grandma Elizabeth saw potential in me. She'd been a savvy businesswoman who built her own real estate portfolio from scratch after my grandfather died, young Emma. She'd tell me during our weekend visits to her beautiful colonial home, "Never let anyone tell you what you're worth. You decide that for yourself." Those weekends with Grandma were my escape. Her house was spacious, filled with beautiful antiques and warmth. The backyard garden, where we'd plant flowers together, became my sanctuary. Unlike the tension-filled air at my parents' home, Grandma's place felt like freedom when I turned 18. Grandma helped me apply for college scholarships and loans my parents considered higher education, putting on airs, and refused to contribute a dime. "College is for people who think they're better than everyone else," my father would say, though I later learned he'd simply never been accepted himself. I worked 3 jobs through college, graduating with a business degree, and immediately landing a position at a real estate firm. Grandma beamed with pride at my graduation, while my parents complained about the parking situation. Then came the day that changed everything. Grandma Elizabeth passed away suddenly from a heart attack when I was 25. I was devastated. She'd been my champion, my safe place at the reading of her will. Everyone was shocked, except perhaps me, when her attorney announced she'd left her house to me. Not my parents, the property at 1842 Magnolia Drive, valued at approximately $850,000. I leave to my granddaughter, Emma Davis, who has shown the determination and responsibility to appreciate its value. The lawyer read as my parents' faces darkened. The will was explicit. The property was fully in my name with no conditions or co-ownership. My parents were left a modest cash inheritance, which they quickly spent on a new car and various electronics from the moment the deed transferred to my name. My parents began referring to it as the family home rather than Emma's house. What started as occasional comments about when we renovate the kitchen gradually morphed into full renovation plans drawn up without my input, all while I paid every bill, every tax payment, every repair cost. "We should really replace these countertops," my mother would say, running her hand across the granite I had just paid to install. "I don't like that pink color in the living room." My father would announce, completely disregarding that I had carefully selected it to match my new furniture, despite my growing success as a realtor. I was now making a comfortable six-figure income. My parents treated me like a teenager playing house. When I would attempt to establish boundaries, their response was always the same. Family doesn't have boundaries, but somehow those lack of boundaries only worked in one direction. After about 3 years of this arrangement, my parents announced they were planning a 3-month European vacation, something they'd always dreamed of doing. What they didn't announce was how they intended to pay for it. "We can use the equity in the house," my father casually mentioned. One Sunday dinner. "You mean my house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "The house that's only in my name. Don't be selfish, Emma," my mother chimed in. "It's the family home. Your grandmother would have wanted us all to benefit from it." I refused to take out a home equity loan for their vacation, but I did make the mistake of offering to help them with some of the expenses since I knew they couldn't afford it otherwise before. I knew it. I was funding nearly the entire trip flights, accommodations, spending money, all while they complained that the hotels I booked weren't centrally located enough the day before they left for their grand European tour. I overheard my mother on the phone with her sister. "Of course, Emma's paying. It's the least she can do, considering we let her keep the house. Let me keep my own house, the house my grandmother specifically left to me." I should have recognized the red flag for what it was, but I still desperately wanted their approval. If only I had known what was coming. I might have changed the locks before they ever left for Paris. It was a Tuesday afternoon in June when everything changed. My parents had been in Europe for about 6 weeks at that point, currently enjoying Paris, according to their social media posts. I was at home after showing properties all morning when I remembered that the kitchen sink had been leaking before they left, since they were returning in just a few weeks. Decided to get it fixed. I needed to ask my father where he had put the warranty information for the faucet he had installed last year, one of the few home improvements he had actually completed himself. I dialed his international number and waited through the series of clicks and beeps that signaled the overseas connection. "Hello." My father's voice sounded distant, the connection slightly delayed. "Hey, Dad, quick question about the kitchen faucet warranty. Do you remember where you put the paperwork? It's starting to leak." He sighed heavily into the phone. "It's in the filing cabinet, in the den, second drawer under kitchen. Why can't this wait until we get back? Because water is currently damaging the cabinet beneath the sink," I explained, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "I just need to call the company and see if it's covered." "Fine, fine," muttered your mother. "And I are about to go to dinner. Some nice place near the Eiffel Tower?" "Sounds great." "How's Paris?" I asked, trying to be polite despite his attitude. "Expensive," he replied curtly. "Look, I've got to go. We'll talk later." "Okay. Thanks for the information. Enjoy your dinner." I heard some rustling. Then what sounded like my father putting the phone in his pocket. He hadn't hung up properly. I was about to end the call from my end when I heard his voice, now muffled but still audible. "Who is that?" My mother's voice. Just Emma, complaining about something in the house again. My father's voice was clearer now, as if he had taken the phone out of his pocket, but still thought the call had ended. What now? My mother sounded annoyed. Something about the kitchen sink. I swear, all she does is find problems with that house. I should have hung up. I knew I should have hung up, but something kept my finger hovering over the end call button, unable to press it. "I don't understand why." "Your mother left her that house in the first place," my mother continued. "We're her parents. It should have gone to us, well, once we're back. We need to have a serious conversation about our retirement, my father said. Emma needs to understand that house is our security for the future. I felt my stomach drop. They were planning something. She's been a burden from the start. My father continued, his voice hard and clear. All those years of expenses. College, everything. Now, she has this valuable property just dropped in her lap, and what she thinks she deserves it. What has she ever done a burden? The word echoed in my head like a gunshot. She's always been selfish, my mother agreed. But she's also easily manipulated. Remember how quickly she agreed to pay for most of this trip? All I had to do was mention family obligation. A few times they laughed together, a synchronized sound I'd heard my whole life, but now seemed sinister. We just need to keep working on her, my father continued. Eventually, she'll sign the house over to us, or at least add us to the deed. Her weakness is that she still wants our approval. I couldn't breathe. My hand was shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. I managed to fumble with my other cell phone and began recording the conversation. What if she doesn't agree? My mother asked. She will. My father said confidently, Emma's always been desperate for our approval. We just need to make her feel guilty enough. Remind her of all we've sacrificed. If that doesn't work, we start talking about nursing homes and medical expenses. Trust me, by this time next year, that house will be in our names, and if worst comes to worst, my mother added, we're living there anyway. Possession is 9/10 of the law. She'd never evict her own parents. They both laughed again. I felt physically ill. Speaking of which, my father continued, when we get back, I think we should take the master bedroom. It's ridiculous that she has the largest room when she's hardly ever there because of work. Good idea, my mother replied. We should also talk about that vacation property she's been looking at. Complete waste of money. If she has extra cash to spend, she should be helping us more. Exactly. Why should we struggle while she's building some real estate empire? She owes us. The conversation continued as they apparently walked to the restaurant, discussing various ways to manipulate me into giving them more money, more control, more of my life. I sat frozen in my chair, tears streaming down my face as every illusion I had about my family shattered around me. After about 15 minutes, the connection finally broke. I sat in complete silence, the phone still clutched in my hand. The house I had worked so hard to maintain, the house my grandmother had entrusted to me, the house I had opened to my parents out of love and obligation. They saw it as nothing more than their entitlement, and me. I was just a burden, a means to an end, someone to be manipulated and used in that moment. Something broke inside me, but something else, something harder, colder, and more determined took its place. I looked around at the home I had shared with them, seeing for the first time all the ways they had gradually asserted ownership. My father's recliner, positioned in the prime spot in the living room. My mother's decorative plates replacing my artwork. My own belongings gradually relegated to my area in what was supposedly my own home. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and made a decision. If I was such a burden, perhaps it was time to lift that weight from their shoulders permanently. I called in sick to work for the next 3 days. I couldn't face clients or colleagues with the storm raging inside me every time I replayed the conversation in my head, and I did obsessively. I vacillated between crushing heartbreak and cold fury. How could the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally see me as nothing more than a resource to be drained after the initial shock wore off? My realtor brain kicked in. I needed information, options, and a solid plan, no emotional decisions. My grandmother hadn't built her success by acting rashly, and neither would I. My first call was to Patricia Winters, a family law attorney I had worked with on several property transactions. I explained my situation. Careful to stick to the facts. The house is completely in my name, I concluded. But they've been living there for almost 4 years. Do they have any legal claim to it? Patricia was blunt and efficient, which was exactly what I needed based on what you've described. Absolutely not. There's no common law ownership that would apply here. You've maintained the property, paid all expenses, and most importantly, you have clear title. The fact that you allowed your parents to live there doesn't grant them any ownership rights. What about the fact that they're my parents? Does that matter legally? Not in terms of property rights. She assured me, you're an adult. You have no legal obligation to house your parents. The house is yours to sell, rent, or do whatever you please with. I felt a weight lift slightly. At least legally, I was on solid ground. What about their belongings? I asked. That's a bit trickier, Patricia admitted. Legally, you should provide reasonable notice and opportunity for them to collect their personal items. I'd recommend documenting everything carefully, and perhaps putting their belongings in storage where they can access them. I took detailed notes and thanked her, my mind already moving to the next step. Next, I contacted my colleague Marcus Wilson, one of the top-performing realtors in our firm, who specialized in quick, discreet sales for divorcing couples and estate liquidations. I need to sell my house quickly, quietly, and for as close to market value as possible, I told him when we met for coffee. The next morning, Marcus raised an eyebrow, running from the law. Emma, the weak joke fell flat against my serious expression. Family situation, I said simply. I need this handled with absolute discretion. No public listings if possible, no signs in the yard, no open houses, and I need it done within 6 weeks. Marcus whistled low. That's aggressive. Even in this market, you're looking at taking a hit on the price for that kind of timeline. I understand. What kind of hit are we talking about? We discussed numbers. My grandmother's house had appreciated significantly since I inherited it. Its current market value was around $90,000 to $80,000. But for the expedited timeline and private sale, I might need to accept somewhere closer to $900,000. I can live with that, I said, calculating quickly. How soon can you start showing it? I have a few pre-qualified buyers looking for exactly this type of property in this neighborhood. I could have private showings set up by next week. Perfect. I'll need the house empty for showings that afternoon. I created a detailed spreadsheet of all the items in the house, categorizing them meticulously. Items I had purchased, items my grandmother had left me, items my parents had brought when they moved in, items of questionable ownership. For the last category, I was ruthlessly honest. If I couldn't definitively prove something was mine, I put it in my parents' column. I wanted no legal or ethical gray areas that could come back to haunt me later. Next came the logistical planning. I needed a place to live temporarily, movers for my belongings, storage for my parents' possessions, new bank accounts at different institutions, a new phone number, a new email address, a plan for dappering. I found a furnished, short-term rental in a city about 2 hours away. I opened new accounts at a bank my parents had never used. I purchased a new phone with a new number. I created a new email address that couldn't be easily guessed. I meticulously gathered all my important documents: birth certificate, social security card, passport, insurance policies, investment accounts, and especially the deed to the house and my grandmother's will, and secured them in a safety deposit box at my new bank. As I worked through my checklist, I occasionally found myself hesitating. Was I overreacting? Then, I'd replay the recorded conversation, hearing my father's contemptuous, "She's been a burden," from the start, and my resolve would harden again one afternoon while sorting through a box of my grandmother's papers I'd kept. I found a letter she'd written to me, but apparently never sent. It was dated just a month before she died. "My dearest Emma," it began, "I want you to know why I've made the decisions I have about my estate. Your parents have always expected things to be handed to them when they wanted to borrow money. For various schemes over the years, I watched them squander every opportunity without learning or growing. But you, my sweet girl, you've worked for everything you have. You understand the value of both money and hard work. I'm leaving you my home because I know you'll honor it, care for it, and use it as a foundation to build your own success, not as a crutch to avoid responsibility. Never doubt that you deserve every good thing that comes to you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. It was as if she had somehow foreseen exactly what would happen and was reaching across time to strengthen my resolve. The next day, I contacted a moving company and scheduled them for the following week. I arranged for a storage unit in my parents' names, paid 6 months in advance, and made sure the information would be mailed to them every night. I updated my planning document, crossing off completed tasks and adding new details as they occurred to me. I was operating with cold efficiency during the day, but at night, alone in what had once been my sanctuary, I often broke down one evening as I was boxing up family photos. I came across one of me as a little girl, sitting on my father's shoulders at a fair. We were both laughing, my small hands gripping his forehead, his hands securely holding my legs. I remembered that day, the cotton candy he bought me, the stuffed animal he'd won by knocking down milk bottles for a moment. I almost called off the whole plan, but then I remembered his voice. "She's been a burden." From the start, the photo went into the box, labeled parents' items. By the end of the 3rd week, Marcus had brought through several potential buyers. 2 had made offers, both under asking. But within the range we had discussed, I accepted the higher one, $915,000. From a corporate executive relocating to the area who could close quickly, the pieces were falling into place. The sale would close in just over 2 weeks. My parents would return from Europe 3 days after that perfect timing. The morning of the closing, I woke up with a strange sense of calm over the past few weeks. I'd cycled through grief, rage, doubt, and determination. Today, I just felt focused. I dressed carefully in a crisp blue suit. Professional, confident the armor I needed for what would be one of the most significant days of my life. The closing was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. At the title company's office, I arrived at 9:45, carrying a slim portfolio containing the few remaining documents I needed. Marcus was already there chatting with the title agent. He gave me an encouraging smile as I approached. "Ready for this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, more than ready. The buyers arrived precisely at 10. Richard Thompson, the executive, and his wife Catherine. They seemed pleasant enough, excited about the house and the neighborhood under different circumstances. I might have shared stories about the property, the beautiful magnolia tree my grandmother had planted, the way the light hit the kitchen in the morning today. I just wanted to get through the paperwork. The process was surprisingly anticlimactic. Sign here, initial, there, sign again. With each signature, I was simultaneously severing a tie and securing my freedom when the title agent finally slid the check across the table. $19,500 zero. Minus the remaining mortgage and closing costs. I felt nothing but relief. Congratulations, the agent said, shaking hands all around. Best of luck to all of you outside in the parking lot. Marcus caught up with me. You okay? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I will be, I said, managing a small smile. Thank you for everything. Marcus, I couldn't have done this without you. Happy to help, he replied, though I'm still curious. About the story behind all this, maybe. Someday I'll tell you, I said, but right now I have movers to meet, the moving company. Arrived at exactly noon. I had already packed most of my personal belongings, clearly labeled and separated from my parents' things. I supervised as they loaded my furniture boxes and suitcases into their truck, bound for my new temporary apartment. My parents' belongings were handled with equal care, but different destination tags. Everything was photographed, inventoried, and loaded into a separate truck, headed for the storage facility I'd rented in their names. I'd arranged for the access codes and payment information to be mailed to them at their current European hotel. As the movers worked, I walked through each room of the house, checking closets and drawers to ensure nothing was overlooked in my parents' room. I found a small box hidden in the back of their closet. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, from my grandmother to my parents. Over the years, I shouldn't have read them, but I couldn't help myself. They detailed years of financial requests, manipulative tactics, and my grandmother's growing disillusionment with her son and daughter-in-law Robert. One letter began. This is the last time I will provide financial assistance without a clear repayment plan. Your constant requests are straining our relationship, and I worry about the example you're setting for Emma, another dated just a year before her death. I'm deeply concerned about your expectation that my home will someday be yours. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I intend to leave my assets to those who will respect and preserve them. Suggest you begin making your own retirement plans that don't involve my property. I carefully replaced the letters in the box and added it to the items for storage. But I felt a renewed connection to my grandmother and her decision to leave me the house she had seen through my parents long before I had. By late afternoon, both trucks were loaded and gone. I stood in the empty house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, without furniture, without photos, without the accumulated evidence of lives lived within these walls. It was just a structure again. Beautiful, valuable, but no longer mine. I walked through each room, one final time in the kitchen, where I'd baked cookies with my grandmother, in the living room, where we'd watched old movies together, in the garden, where she taught me the names of flowers and how to nurture growing things. I hope you understand, I whispered, not sure if I was addressing my grandmother or the house itself. Finally, I placed the note I'd written on the granite countertop in the kitchen, where it would be impossible to miss. Surprise, a burden. Did this? I took one last look around, then walked out the front door, locking it behind me. I dropped the keys through the mail slot, got into my car, and drove away. Without looking back, as I merged onto the highway, heading toward my new temporary home, I felt something unexpected: freedom. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was making a decision completely for myself, unburdened by familial obligation or the desperate need for approval. The burden had been lifted not from my parents, but from me. My temporary apartment was nothing special. A furnished one-bedroom in a modern complex with amenities I'd probably never use. But it was mine, with no history, no expectations, and most importantly, no one telling me I didn't deserve to be there. The first few days passed in a blur of practical tasks. I unpacked the essentials, set up my new laptop with enhanced security measures, and contacted my office to let them know I was taking a 2-week vacation, effective immediately. I didn't provide details, just that I needed personal time. By the end of the first week, I had established a routine of sorts: morning coffee on the small balcony overlooking a man-made pond, afternoons spent researching potential places to relocate permanently, evenings filled with takeout food and mindless television to quiet my thoughts. I checked my old email and voicemail exactly once a day, never responding. There was nothing from my parents yet. They were still enjoying the final days of their European adventure, completely unaware that their lives were about to change dramatically. My phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. My heart jumped before I realized it was just a delivery notification. Still, it made me aware of the constant state of tension I was living in, waiting for the inevitable explosion when my parents returned home to distract myself. I reached out to Megan Lancaster, a college friend I'd lost touch with, largely because my parents had never approved of her wild lifestyle, which consisted mainly of dating occasionally and enjoying concerts. "Emma Davis, is that really you?" she exclaimed when I called. "It's been, 3 years?" "Something like that," I admitted. "I've been preoccupied." "Let me guess, still trying to please the unpleasable parents." Her directness made me laugh, for what felt like the first time in weeks actually. "I'm calling because I finally stopped trying." We met for dinner that night at a restaurant halfway between our locations over pasta and wine. I told her everything: the inheritance, the overheard conversation, the house sale, my disappearing act. "Holy Emma," she said. When I finished, "That's simultaneously the most terrible and most badass thing I've ever heard." "I'm still not sure if I did the right thing," I admitted. "Are you kidding me? They were planning to manipulate you out of your house, a house your grandmother specifically left to you. They called you a burden while living in your home, rentre, and having you pay for their European vacation. If anything, you were too nice with the whole storage unit arrangement." Her validation loosened. Something tight in my chest. Maybe I wasn't overreacting. Maybe this was the appropriate response to years of manipulation. The next day, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Sarah Palmer, specialized in family trauma, and had an opening the following week. It was time to address not just the recent betrayal, but the lifetime of conditional love that had preceded it. 10 days after the house closing, my old phone exploded with notifications, texts, voicemails, emails, all from my parents. They had returned from Europe and discovered the truth. The first voicemail: "Emma, what the hell is going on? We just got home and our key doesn't work. Call us immediately." My father's voice was more annoyed than concerned. The second: "An hour later, Emma Marie Davis. This is not funny. Where are you? Why is the house empty? Call us right now." He sounded angry. The third from my mother: "Emma, sweetie, we're very worried about you. Please call us as soon as you get this. We just want to know you're safe." Her voice dripped with the manufactured concern she'd perfected over the years. The texts escalated similarly, from confusion to demands to threats to fake worry. The final voicemail left at nearly midnight. "We found your note. I don't know what you think. You heard, but you've made a terrible mistake. This is our home too. You had no right to sell it. We're consulting an attorney. First thing tomorrow. You've really done it this time, Emma." I saved all the messages but responded to none of them. Let them consult any attorney they wanted. The house had been mine to sell. True to their word, they showed up at my real estate office the next morning, causing exactly the scene I'd anticipated. My colleague Jamie texted me, "Your parents are here raising hell." "Boss, Told them you're on vacation and showed them the door when they wouldn't leave. Everything okay? I responded with a simple family drama. I'll explain when I get back. Thanks for the heads up later that day. My boss called directly. Emma, I don't know what's going on with your family, but they made some pretty serious accusations today. Something about you selling their house illegally. I took a deep breath. It wasn't their house. It was mine, left to me by my grandmother. I've been letting them live there, but I recently discovered they were planning to manipulate me into signing it over to them. So yes, I sold my house, which was fully within my legal rights. I'm sorry. They brought this drama to the office. There was a pause before she responded. I see. Well, they've been banned from the premises. Take whatever time you need and let me know if there's anything we can do. Her simple acceptance was another weight lifted. I'd been worried about the professional fallout, but it seemed I had more support than I'd realized. Over the next few days, my parents tried every avenue they could think of to reach me. They contacted mutual acquaintances, distant relatives even, my college alumni association. Each attempt further justified my decision to cut ties. 2 weeks after their return, they somehow obtained my new email address, likely from a well-meaning but naive former neighbor, and sent a lengthy message laying out their version of events. According to them, I had misunderstood. A private conversation overreacted dramatically and betrayed my family in the most hurtful way possible. They were willing to forgive me if I would make things right by using the proceeds from the house sale to buy a new property that we could all live in together. The audacity was almost impressive. Even now, they were still trying to manipulate me. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Patricia, my attorney, who confirmed again that I had acted completely within my legal rights and advised me to continue maintaining distance. As the weeks passed, I gradually began rebuilding my life. I returned to work, threw myself into my real estate business, and continued weekly therapy sessions. I found a lovely condo to purchase in my new city. Smaller than my grandmother's house, but completely mine in every way that mattered. One evening, as I was arranging books on my new shelves, I came across an old photo album. I hadn't opened in years. Inside were pictures of family vacations, holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, moments that had once seemed happy, but now felt hollow. Knowing what lay beneath the smiling facades, I closed the album and put it away in a closet. Perhaps someday I'd be ready to look at those memories again, but not yet. For now, I was focused on creating new memories, ones not tainted by manipulation and conditional love. The burden I'd carried all my life. The desperate need to earn my parents' approval was finally lifted, and I was lighter than I'd ever been. I managed to avoid my parents for nearly 3 months. I changed my routines, shopped at different stores, and became hypervigilant about my surroundings. But I knew a confrontation was inevitable. What I didn't expect was how it would happen. Rachel, Chin, my former neighbor, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Emma, I thought you should know. Your parents are back at the house. My heart raced. What do you mean, at the house? It's not their house anymore. I know that, Rachel said, but they're parked outside right now, just sitting in their car, staring at it. The new owners are away on business, so I don't think they know yet. I just thought you might want to know. I thanked her and immediately called Richard Thompson, the new owner, to warn him. He was concerned, but grateful for the heads up, and said he'd alert his security company later that evening. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Emma." It was my father's voice, tight with controlled anger. "We need to meet tomorrow. The coffee shop on Maple Street at 10:00 a.m. If you don't show up, we're going to your office again. And this time, we won't leave quietly." Before I could respond, he hung up. I called Patricia immediately. "They're threatening to make a scene at my workplace if I don't meet with them." "You don't have to meet them at all," she reminded me. "We could get a restraining order based on these threats." I considered this option, but ultimately decided against it. No, I think I need to face them. But I want it on my terms, not theirs. The next morning I arrived at the Daily Grind, a popular coffee shop downtown, at precisely 10:15 a.m. Late enough to make a point, but not so late they'd leave. I'd chosen this location because it was public, always busy, and the owner was a client of mine who I knew would have my back if things got ugly. I spotted my parents immediately, sitting at a corner table. My mother's face was drawn, her normally perfectly styled hair looking somewhat neglected. My father's jaw was set in that familiar rigid line that had always signaled dangerous waters ahead. I approached their table, calmly, dressed in my most professional outfit, another suit of armor, Robert Diana. I greeted them deliberately, using their first names instead of Mom and Dad. My mother flinched. My father's face darkened further. "Sit down," he commanded. "I'm not here to take orders," I replied evenly. "I agreed to meet you because I thought it might be time to clear the air. But this conversation happens on equal terms, or not at all." I sat down across from them, placing my phone conspicuously on the table between us. "Is that really necessary?" my mother asked, gesturing to the phone. "Given our history." "Yes," I said. "I record all important business meetings now. We're your parents, not a business meeting." My father snapped. "And yet you threaten my workplace if I didn't comply with your demands. That sounds more like extortion than parenting." My directness caught them off guard. They were used to me backing down, accommodating, seeking peace at any cost. "What you did was unforgivable," my father finally said. "You stole our home. It was never your home." I replied, "It was my home, which I generously allowed you to live in, a fact you apparently considered a burden." My mother's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I pressed play on my phone, and their own voices filled the space between us. "She's been a burden from the start. All those years of expenses, college, everything. Now, she has this valuable property just dropped in her lap, and what she thinks she deserves it. What has she ever done?" I stopped the recording and looked up to find my mother, pale, and my father flushed with anger. "You recorded us privately." "That's illegal," he sputtered. "Actually, it's not illegal to record a conversation that you're part of, which I was, since you called me and then failed to hang up properly. But that's beside the point. The point is that I finally heard what you really think of me." "You misunderstood," my mother interjected quickly. "We were tired, stressed about money, while on an expensive European vacation that I paid for," I interrupted. "Please don't insult my intelligence by lying to me." "Again, so you sold the house out from under us?" my father demanded. "Left us homeless as some sort of revenge. I sold my house because I finally realized it would never truly be mine. As long as you were in it, and you're not homeless, you have the money Grandma left you. Oh, wait, you spent that on a new car instead of securing your own housing." My father leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You know, we could see you for this. We lived there for years. We have rights, actually." "You don't," I replied calmly. I consulted with an attorney before making any decisions. You had no legal claim to the property. You paid no rent, contributed to no expenses, and your names were nowhere on the deed. But please, feel free to waste what money you have left on a lawsuit you can't win." My mother began to cry. Those familiar tears that had so often manipulated me into compliance. This time I felt nothing but a detached sort of pity. "What do you want from us, Emma?" she asked through her tears. "An apology?" "Fine. We're sorry if you misinterpreted what you heard." "If I misinterpreted," I repeated incredulously, "that's not an apology. That's another manipulation. And it's exactly why I made the decision." I did. I took a deep breath, centering myself, before continuing. "What I want is very simple. I want you to acknowledge what you did. Not just the conversation I overheard, but the years of treating me like an investment that needed to pay dividends. I want you to understand that your behavior has consequences, and I want you to respect the boundaries I'm establishing now, which are what exactly my father asked, his voice cold. I will not be providing you with any financial support going forward. I will not be sharing my new address with you. I will communicate with you only when and if I choose to. If you come to my workplace again or harass me in any way, I will pursue legal action. So that's it. After everything we've done for you, you're just cutting us off." My mother's voice rose dramatically. "After everything you've done to me," I corrected her. "And yes, unless and until you can demonstrate genuine remorse and change. This is where we stand." My father stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You ungrateful little Robert." My mother grabbed his arm. Several other patrons had turned to look at our table. He sat back down, seething. "You think you're so much better than us now, with your real estate career and your fancy education. But let me tell you something. You wouldn't have any of it if we hadn't raised you." "You're right," I said, surprising them both. "I wouldn't be who I am today without you." Every manipulative comment, every conditional show of affection, every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough. It all taught me exactly what kind of person I didn't want to become. So in a way, I should thank you. My mother's tears had stopped, replaced by a stunned expression. My father looked like he'd been slapped. I stood up, gathering my purse and phone. "Your belongings are in a storage unit. I've paid for 6 months. The information was sent to your hotel in Paris, but I can text you the details again if you need them. That's it. That's all you have to say to us." My mother asked, her voice small. I paused, looking at them both. Really looking at them. Perhaps for the first time, not as the towering authority figures of my childhood or the manipulative forces of my adult life, but just as two deeply flawed people who had never learned how to love without conditions. "I hope you find peace," I said. Finally, "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for that makes you treat the people who love you the way you do. But I won't be your collateral damage anymore." I walked away, then feeling dozens of eyes on my back, but standing straighter than I had in years. Outside, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air, feeling something unexpected wash over me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pain. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was peace. 6 months after the confrontation at the coffee shop, I was fully settled into my new life. I'd purchased a charming townhouse in Richmond, about 2 hours from my former home, and had transferred to our firm's office there. The change of scenery had been exactly what I needed, close enough to maintain important professional connections, but far enough to start fresh. My new home was distinctly mine, in a way my grandmother's house had never quite managed to be. I decorated it entirely to my own taste, modern, but comfortable with splashes of color that brightened even the gluiest days. No antiques, no family heirlooms, nothing that carried the weight of the past. Professionally, I was thriving. The fresh start had reinvigorated my passion for real estate, and I found myself particularly drawn to helping first-time homebuyers navigate the complicated process. There was something deeply satisfying about guiding people through one of the most significant purchases of their lives, ensuring they understood every document, every commitment, every right they had. You explain things differently than other realtors. One young couple told me after closing on their first home, "Like you really want us to understand, not just sign. Everyone deserves to know exactly what they're agreeing to." I replied, thinking of how differently my own story might have unfolded if I'd recognized the manipulation earlier. My therapy sessions with Dr. Palmer continued, though we'd reduced the frequency to twice a month. Our work had shifted from the immediate trauma of my parents' betrayal to the deeper patterns that had defined our relationship for decades. "You mentioned something interesting last time," Dr. Palmer said. "During one session, you said you still sometimes feel guilty for overreacting to what your parents said. I'd like to explore that a bit more." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Sometimes I wonder if I should have confronted them first, given them a chance to explain, before taking such drastic action. What do you think they would have said if you had? I considered this. They would have denied it, or said I misunderstood, or that they were just tired and stressed and didn't mean it. And would any of those explanations have changed the fundamental truth of what you heard? No. I admitted it would have just given them the opportunity to manipulate me again. Dr. Palmer nodded. "Emma, what you experienced with your parents is something we call financial abuse, using money and resources as tools of control and manipulation. It's particularly insidious because it's often disguised as family, helping family or parents looking out for their child." The term financial abuse hit me like a physical blow. I'd never considered applying that label to my situation, but as soon as she said it, I recognized its truth. The way they planned to pressure you into signing over your home, the way they manipulated you into paying for their vacation, even the way they made you feel guilty about your grandmother leaving you the house. "These are all forms of financial abuse," she continued, "and like any form of abuse, the appropriate response is to protect yourself, which is exactly what you did." Something shifted inside me that day. A final piece of lingering guilt dissolved, replaced by clarity. After that session, I began researching financial abuse in earnest. I was startled to discover how common it was, particularly within families, and how few resources existed to help people recognize and address it. An idea began to form, one that grew stronger with each article I read and each personal story I encountered online. 2 weeks later, I approached my boss with a proposal. "I want to create a workshop." I explained something for first-time homebuyers, especially women, about recognizing and preventing financial manipulation in major purchases. My boss, Vanessa Martinez, listened thoughtfully as I outlined my concept. "This isn't just about real estate transactions," I concluded. "It's about empowering people to make financial decisions without manipulation or pressure, whether from family members, partners, or even unethical professionals." "I think it's brilliant," Vanessa said. When I finished, and timely, "we've all seen clients pressured into decisions they later regret. If we can position ourselves as the agency that truly educates and advocates for clients' financial autonomy, that's a powerful market differentiation. with her blessing. I began developing materials for the workshop. What started as a simple presentation quickly evolved into a comprehensive program covering topics from recognizing subtle manipulation tactics to establishing healthy financial boundaries. I called it Building Foundations, Financial Autonomy in Major Life Decisions. We offered the first workshop on a Saturday morning, expecting perhaps a dozen attendees. Over 30 people showed up. The response was overwhelming. People shared stories of parents who had pressured them into inappropriate investments, partners who had undermined their financial confidence, friends who had manipulated them into inappropriate loans. Each story resonated with my own experience, reinforcing my conviction that this work was needed. After the third successful workshop, a local women's magazine asked to interview me about the program. The article, titled Financial Freedom, Emma Davis's Mission to End Financial Manipulation, brought even more attention to the issue. It was through this growing network that I reconnected with my grandmother's sister, Aunt Judith, whom I hadn't seen since the funeral. She reached out after reading the magazine article. "Emma, your grandmother would be so proud of what you're doing." She told me over lunch, "Elizabeth faced similar struggles with your father throughout his life. He always expected things to be handed to him, just as his father had before him." I had no idea. I admitted Grandma never really talked about that. She was private about family matters, Aunt Judith said. But she saw so much of herself in you. The independence, the work ethic. It's why she left you the house instead of Robert. She knew you'd use it as a foundation, not a crutch. Her words echoed the letter I'd found while packing, confirming what I'd already begun to suspect. My grandmother had made her decision with clear eyes and full awareness of its implications. "Have you had any contact with your parents recently?" Aunt Judith asked carefully. "Not since our confrontation," I replied. "I've received a few emails, but nothing that suggests they've really reflected on their behavior or taken responsibility for it." She nodded sadly. "Robert has always struggled with accountability, even as a child. Nothing was ever his fault." "I'm sorry. Emma, you deserved better." "Parents, I'm making peace with it," I said, surprised to find that it was true. I can't change who they are or how they treated me, but I can use that experience to help others and to build a better life for myself. On the 1-year anniversary of selling my grandmother's house, I took the day off work and drove to the cemetery where she was buried. I brought a bouquet of her favorite flowers, pink peas, and sat beside her headstone. "I think I finally understand what you were trying to teach me," I said softly. "About self-worth and standing on my own. About recognizing when love comes with too many conditions. I wish we'd had more time together, but I'm grateful for every lesson you shared." As I sat there, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The initial pain and betrayal had gradually transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acceptance. My parents were who they were. Their behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth. The true burden I'd carried wasn't being their daughter. It was the exhausting effort of trying to earn love that should have been freely given in setting those expectations aside. I'd found a freedom I never knew was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Still on for dinner tonight. The whole gang's excited to see you." I smiled as I replied in the affirmative. The gang was a group of friends I'd reconnected with or made anew. In the past year, people who accepted me as I was, who gave without keeping score, who supported without controlling this, was what real relationships felt like. This was what I deserved all along. As I drove home, I thought about the note I'd left in the empty house. Surprise, a burden did this. At the time, I'd meant it as a bitter reclamation of the word my father had used to wound me. Now, a year later, I saw it differently sometimes. The heaviest burdens we carry are the expectations we place on ourselves to be perfect enough, accommodating enough, successful enough to finally earn the love that should be our birthright. Laying down that burden was the most liberating act of my life. That evening, surrounded by friends who had become my chosen family, I raised a glass in a private toast to my grandmother, to my journey, and to the woman I was still becoming. Unburdened, uncompromised, and finally, truly free. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from people who were supposed to love you? Sometimes, the hardest boundaries to set are with family. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that. It's okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again in today's story. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to my channel. Get out of my lobby. This place isn't for your kind. The words didn't slip out by accident. They were delivered like policy, loud, certain, and rehearsed. Gregory Vance, manager of the Horizon Grand Hotel in downtown Seattle, stood behind the front desk with his arms crossed and judgment written all over his face. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't hiding. He said it so the entire lobby could hear. He looked right at her, at the black woman in plain clothes, and decided right then and there that she didn't belong. What he didn't know was that in exactly 9 minutes, the woman standing in front of him would fire him and every single member of his team right there in the very lobby where he had just tried to humiliate her. Before we get into this, tell me where you're watching from. Comment your city below. And if this moment stopped you in your tracks the way it did the guests around her, hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. Now, let's rewind to how this moment started. Aisha Carter walked through the glass doors of the Horizon Grand alone. No assistant, no designer, purse, no brand labels, just a black t-shirt, fitted jeans, and calm eyes that had seen this scenario before. She took so confident steps across the marble floor. Her sneakers barely made a sound, but her presence sent a ripple through the lobby. She approached the front desk. Behind it stood Gregory, 48, flanked by 2 clerks, Lauren Hayes, 30, with a tight ponytail and tighter smile, and Kevin Patel, 27. Arms folded, eyes already narrowed in suspicion. None of them greeted her. None of them smiled. They just looked her up and down like a problem. Waiting to happen. I have a reservation, Aisha said evenly. Penthouse suite. The name's Carter. Gregory squinted at her like he misheard. That's a very high tier room. Are you sure you booked the right hotel? Aisha didn't answer. The insult. She calmly slid her ID and black credit card across the counter. Gregory picked them up with 2 fingers, holding the card like it might stain him. Strange. He muttered, "This looks suspicious." Lauren pressed a button on the desk. Her voice rang out over the intercom security. We may have an unauthorized guest trying to access one of our premium suites. Possibly fraudulent. Aisha's expression didn't change. Her voice stayed low. I'm not here for trouble. I'm here for my room. Kevin scoffed. You know, people try this all the time. Fancy cards. They found fake names, usually hoping we won't check from across the room. Sophie Lynn, a travel blogger visiting from San Francisco, had already raised her phone. I'm filming this. she whispered to her friend, Jacob Reed. Then louder, "This is being posted. People need to see this." Jacob started live streaming. "We're at the Horizon Grand in Seattle," he narrated, "and we're watching something ugly happen in real time." Elena Ruiz, the young concierge, standing off to the side, glanced up from her desk. Her eyes met Aisha's. Something passed between them. Silent, swift recognition, maybe, or concern. Elena took a step forward, but Gregory cut her off with a glance. "She doesn't belong here," he snapped. Aisha took out her phone and sent a silent tap on the other end in a corporate office 3 blocks away. Her executive assistant, Nia Thompson, picked up immediately. "It's happening," Aisha said quietly. Nia didn't hesitate. "The system's ready." Gregory still held her card, flipping it like he was waiting for it to confess something. "You know," he said louder, "this time, we've seen this scam before. People come in, claim to have bookings, flash a high-limit card, and disappear the second we call the bank. Well, not this time." He turned to Kevin and handed him the card. "Lock it up." Kevin took it eagerly and walked to a small cabinet. He opened a drawer behind the desk, revealing a brushed steel safe with exaggerated care. He placed the card inside and slammed the door shut. "You're done here," he said with a smile. Sophie, filming, exclaimed, "They just took her card." Jacob stepped closer. "That's theft. That's not policy." Aisha didn't move. Her voice stayed calm. "You're going to regret this." At 24, Aisha had walked into a boutique hotel in Atlanta after a red-eye flight. She was dressed in sweats, exhausted from meetings, and had a confirmed reservation. The man at the desk looked her up and down and said, "You don't look like someone who'd stay here." He told her the system was down and she could come back when the manager's around. She slept in her car that night. The next morning, she began outlining a business plan that would grow into one of the largest hospitality groups in the country, now standing in a lobby she owned in a hotel. Under her brand, the same tone, the same assumption, the same kind of man tried to erase her again. Gregory leaned forward. "Your reservations, canceled. We don't tolerate deception. You're holding up." "Real guests," Aisha didn't flinch. "You mean the ones watching this right now?" She gestured towards Sophie and Jacob, who were still filming. Other guests had stopped what they were doing. Some were staring. Some were whispering. Some were clearly uncomfortable. Elena looked on. Jaw tight, Lauren stepped in. "You need to leave now." Aisha held her gaze. "Are you sure?" Lauren's tone dripped with confidence. "Positive, or we'll call the authorities." Gregory smirked. "Go ahead. Make a scene. It won't end well for you." Aisha didn't blink. "That's the last time you speak to me like that?" Elena finally stepped forward. "She's right. I saw her name in our system this morning. Her reservation is valid." Gregory turned to her sharply. "One more word, and you're gone too." Aisha reached for her phone again. This time, her voice was louder. "Nia log. This moment, lock in the video." Timestamps. Nia's voice came through clearly. "Logged, systems ready." Jacob leaned toward the front desk, pointing to the card through the safe's glass window. "It says, a Carter. VIP. It's real. She's real." Gregory scoffed. "Anyone can make a fake card?" "People like her," Aisha interrupted. "Finish that sentence, go on." But he didn't. The words died in his throat as he noticed the growing circle of eyes around them. Aisha stepped forward, calm, controlled, but every syllable carried weight. "You've just made the worst mistake of your professional life," she said. Gregory smiled, like he still held power. "You think so?" She stared into him. "No, I know so." And as the tension gripped the lobby like a tightening noose, No one, not Gregory, not Lauren, not Kevin, had any idea who she truly was, but they were about to find out. Kevin Patel's voice rang out across the lobby with forced authority, holding up the small silver key to the safe like it was a trophy. "This card is now company property," he declared, "and until the bank verifies it, you're not getting it back." He grinned, smug, performative, sure of himself behind him. The safe door clicked shut with a cold finality. But Kevin didn't see the storm. He just invited Aisha. Carter stood there, unwavering. Her face was unreadable, her silence more commanding than any outburst. Gregory leaned in again, eyes flicking toward the slowly growing crowd. "You're wasting everyone's time," he said. "Walk out now, or we'll make that choice for you." That's when Lauren, emboldened by the backing of her manager and Kevin's theatrics, stepped out from behind the desk, straightened her blazer, and reached for Aisha's arm. "You've been warned. It's time for you to leave." The moment her hand made contact, the entire atmosphere in the lobby shifted. Gasps erupted. Sophie. Lynn's phone caught the movement instantly. "She just grabbed her," she shouted, already uploading the clip to Reddit with a simple caption, "This is happening live at Horizon Grand." Jacob's live stream now had over 100 watchers, most of them flooding the chat with shock and disbelief. Elena Ruiz stepped forward, her voice shaking with restrained outrage. "You can't put your hands on a guest," she said sharply. "Her reservation is valid." Lauren spun around, eyes flashing. "You stay out of this if you want your job." But Elena didn't back down. She looked at Aisha, who still hadn't moved an inch, and took a small step closer to her. "I won't lie for you," she said to Gregory. That was the exact moment Gregory dropped all pretense. "She's trying to scam us," he hissed. "People like her always think they can play the system." His tone was lower now, more venomous, but the words reached the ears of at least 3 guests standing nearby. One of them, a gray-haired woman holding her phone just a little higher, said to no one in particular, "I can't believe what I'm hearing." Another, a man in a navy suit, leaned toward Jacob's stream and said, "You getting all this?" Jacob nodded. All of it. In the center of this storm stood Aisha, still perfectly still. She brought her phone back to her ear. "Naya," she said calmly. "Escalate the internal system. Begin audit documentation. I want every word logged from this point forward." On the other end, Naya. Thompson's voice was crisp, understood, time-stamped, and recorded. "Do you want Carla on standby?" Aisha replied, "Give me 1 more minute." As she said it, Kevin leaned in over the desk and shouted loud enough to be heard by the far wall. "You're a fraud, lady. You think a card gets you in here. Go back to wherever you came from." A chorus of murmurs rose from the lobby. Elena was now fully out from behind the concierge podium, standing shoulder to shoulder with Aisha. "I've worked here for 3 years," she said, her voice firm, "and I've seen this pattern before. Every time a guest like her walks in alone, confident, dressed down, you treat them like criminals." Gregory's eyes narrowed, and every time someone questions it, Elena continued, "You say it's policy, but it's not. It's you." Backstory seeped into Aisha's mind. She was 16, dressed in her Sunday clothes, waiting in a hotel lobby in Charlotte. Her parents were late. A clerk walked up to her and said, "This area is for guests only." She tried to explain, but the woman didn't listen. She was escorted to the sidewalk like a loiterer. The shame stayed in her bones for years. It didn't make her small. It made her sharp. It made her build. Gregory wasn't finished. He turned toward Elena. "Enough. I want her out now, or I'll have security escort both of you." Lauren, who'd been silent since Sophie started filming again, added quickly. She refused to provide valid ID. This is a breach. I'm reporting it. But the tension was already turning against them. Jacob, still filming, turned the camera toward his own face. Just to be clear, he said, we're watching a guest be harassed by hotel staff after providing her name card and ID, and now they're physically trying to remove her. This is not just bad service. This is disgusting. Aisha turned to Kevin, her voice no louder than before. Return my card, now. Kevin leaned over the counter, smirking. Or what? Aisha's eyes didn't move. Or you'll be locked out of the Horizon system for life. No employment. No references. No appeal. Lauren snorted. You don't speak for Horizon? But Elena spoke up immediately. She does? Gregory's voice snapped like a whip. You're out of line, Elena. You don't even know who she is, Sophie interjected from the side. Oh, she does? We all do? She turned the camera back to Aisha. Look at how she's standing. Look at how calm she is. That's not someone begging for service. That's someone letting you dig your own grave. Aisha's voice stayed steady. Kevin, one last chance. Kevin looked unsure. For the first time, Gregory tried to salvage the moment. This isn't about anything personal. It's about protocol. But his words came too late. Sophie and Jacob's videos were already spreading, and guests were whispering about what they'd just seen. One man said, I've stayed here for years, never again. A young woman holding a carry-on suitcase turned to Elena and asked, Is she really who I think she is? Elena didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Then the twist that shifted the lobby's temperature completely. Elena stepped forward, voice louder. Now, this isn't the first time Gregory ignored complaints like this. He's been warned. I logged 3 of them last month, 2 from solo women of color, all dismissed. Gregory's face flushed red. That's a lie. Jacob swung the camera toward him. You sure? Aisha looked around slowly. Every phone was raised now, every guest paying attention, she said to no one in particular, but loud enough for every person to hear. Your time running this place unchecked is over. Gregory tried one more desperate move. Fine. If you won't leave, I'll call the cops myself. Aisha smiled. Please do. And for a moment, Gregory hesitated, because for the first time, he saw something in her face that unsettled him. Not fear, not uncertainty. Power-controlled, silent, and far beyond his reach. Guests began to move subtly, but deliberately, stepping between Aisha and the front desk. They didn't know her name yet, but they knew enough. One woman rolled her suitcase directly into Lauren's path. Another man pulled his phone charger from the desk outlet and stood beside Elena. Jacob turned his phone around, capturing the growing crowd. They're protecting her. Now, he said, into the stream. Aisha, still in the center, took a single step forward and said one sentence. This lobby belongs to me. The words didn't shout. They didn't need to. Kevin's smirk faltered. Lauren looked down. Gregory blinked. And in that split-second silence, the lobby once hostile began to turn. How would you have responded if someone tried to push you out of a hotel? You owned. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Throw her out. Now. Gregory's voice cracked across the marble lobby, like a gavel desperate to regain control that had already slipped through his fingers. The lobby wasn't quiet anymore. Phones were raised. Whispers were, now, open protests, but Gregory, red-faced and trembling with authority, he no longer truly held, pressed forward anyway. She's trespassing. She's a liar, he bellowed. He turned toward the intercom and slammed his hand down on the button. Kevin's voice crackled across the entire lobby's speaker system. To all staff, unauthorized individual in the lobby, do not engage. Repeat, Do not engage with this guest. Fraud, alert the moment the announcement ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the words themselves. Aisha didn't flinch, but the guests did. Sophie Lynn shouted from the corner, "She's not a fraud. We're recording everything." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. Jacob's live stream view count had jumped past 2. Comments rolled in like waves. That's theft, unreal. How is this happening in a luxury hotel? A mother with her teenage daughter backed away from the check-in line whispering. They're going to regret this. Meanwhile, Lauren, shaken but still following Gregory's lead, grabbed Aisha's arm again and yanked her toward the exit. "Let's go. You're embarrassing yourself," she hissed through clenched teeth. That was when Elena Ruiz stepped between them. Physically, the youngest staff member in the room, the only one to speak up, consistently stood shoulder to shoulder with Aisha. "Don't touch her again," she said, loud and clear. Lauren froze. "You'll be fired," she spat. Elena didn't back down. "Then fire me," she snapped. "But you're not putting your hands on her." Gregory surged forward, his frustration boiling over. "Do you even know who she is?" he barked at Elena. "She's a fraud. Look at her." He gestured at Aisha's t-shirt. Her jeans, her sneakers, like it all proved something. People who stay in penthouse suites don't look like that. Aisha's voice was quiet, measured. "You keep saying that word, fraud, like it'll make your mistake disappear." She took one small step forward. The distance between them closed like a noose, tightening around Gregory's narrative. At 29, Aisha had flown into Los Angeles for a conference. She'd been wearing a navy pantsuit, professional but not extravagant. The man behind the desk had looked at her ID, then at her, then again at the card. "This can't be you," he'd said. "We'll need a second form of ID." She provided one, then another. But they still made her wait, while verifying 2 hours. Meanwhile, she watched 3 white men walk in and get suites without even showing ID. That night, she drafted the policy she would later implement in her own hotels: zero tolerance for guest profiling. That moment lived in her bones, and now so did this one. "Get security." Gregory barked at Kevin, who had stepped away from the desk and now hovered near the office hallway. Uncertain. Call them in now. But Kevin hesitated. His confidence had cracked, because in front of him stood not a woman begging for entry, but someone who knew something he didn't. And worse, guests were watching Sophie's phone moved from face to face, capturing every twitch of guilt, every flinch of power. Jacob still live streaming. Turned toward a guest, standing nearby. "Sir, what are you seeing here?" the man replied without hesitation. "I see someone getting thrown out of a hotel. She clearly belongs in Gregory." Spun. "That's slander. She hasn't proven anything." Aisha calmly turned her phone toward the crowd. "Would anyone like proof?" Jacob immediately called out. "Show them." But she didn't lift a badge or pull out a contract. Instead, she turned to Elena and asked softly, "Do you see my name in the reservation system?" Elena nodded. "Yes, it's under a Carter penthouse. Checked in remotely. And is the VIP tag attached to it?" Aisha continued. Elena nodded again. "Yes, marked as executive level, override owner, level clearance." The lobby fell quiet. Gregory's eyes darted. That could have been faked. She could have hacked in. Sophie snapped. "You really think someone walked in off the street, hacked your system, and brought 2,000 witnesses with them?" Lauren, suddenly pale, looked down at the floor. Kevin stepped forward, hesitantly. "I locked the card in the safe under your instruction." "Greg, what if we're wrong?" Aisha turned toward him. "You were told to steal from me. That's what you did, but you had a choice." Kevin's mouth opened, then shut again. Then the crowd shifted. A guest, an older woman with white hair and a floral scarf, moved forward. She positioned herself between Aisha and Lauren and said simply, "You're not laying a hand on her again." Another man joined, then a woman with a stroller. Within seconds, a loose half circle had formed in front of Aisha, as if the guests themselves had drawn a boundary. Gregory stood behind the desk, suddenly looking much smaller than he had moments ago. Aisha looked around at the human barrier that had risen without her asking. "This is what happens," she said softly, "when silence stops being an option." Jacob turned his phone to the crowd. "They're standing with her now," he said into the camera, "and I don't think they're going anywhere." Gregory's desperation hit its peak. He shouted over the lobby noise, "You're all being manipulated. She's playing you." And then Kevin, still holding the intercom mic, whispered something barely audible, but the whole lobby heard it as it echoed through the speakers. "She owns the place, doesn't she?" It hung in the air like smoke. Sophie slowly panned her phone toward Aisha's face. "Do you?" she asked. Breathless, Elena stepped forward. "She does." Gasps rippled across the room. A man near the lounge chairs whispered, "Wait, this is her hotel." Lauren turned to Gregory in horror. "You said she was lying." Gregory didn't speak. Jacob looked into his lens. This is the moment everything changed. Aisha stepped forward again, now past Elena, past the half circle of guests, right up to the front desk where Gregory stood. Frozen. "You wanted me out," she said evenly. "You framed me. You called me a thief. And you humiliated me in my own lobby." Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came out from her phone. Nia's voice came through loud and clear. "Aisha, Carla is ready. Do you want me to patch her through?" Aisha's eyes didn't leave Gregory's. "Yes, right now." She tapped the screen. Once, and Carla Bennett's voice, sharp and deliberate, came through the speaker. "Aisha, everything's prepared. We're standing by for your authorization." Aisha took a breath. "Terminate Gregory Vance, terminate Lauren Hayes, terminate Kevin Patel, immediate removal from the Horizon system. Freeze their access credentials and log today's incident for legal audit." "A beat of silence confirmed," Carla said, processing now. And thus, in that instant, Gregory's access badge buzzed red. So did Lawrence. So did Kevin's. They were locked out live in front of every guest. No shouting, no theatrics, just justice. Quiet, complete, irreversible. And in the eyes of every guest present, a single truth became clear. This woman hadn't just defended herself. She had dismantled a system in 9 minutes flat. What would you have done if you witnessed this? Let us know. In the comments below, Gregory, Vance's last shred of composure, shattered the moment his access badge buzzed red. He stared at it, stunned, like it had betrayed him. Kevin's face drained of color as his own badge blinked, the same error locking him out of the Horizon system. In real time, Lauren froze, lips parted in disbelief, still gripping the edge of the counter as if hanging on would somehow keep her job from vanishing beneath her feet. But the lobby had already shifted. What once felt like a theater of dominance now pulsed with rebellion. Elena Ruiz. No longer. The silent concierge stood tall beside Aisha, her jaw tight, her voice steady. "They've been removed," she said loud enough for every guest to hear me. "Don't speak for Horizon anymore," Gregory erupted. "This is illegal. You can't just... This isn't how hotels operate." He turned to Lauren, desperate. "Call corporate. Get someone on the line now." But Lauren's hands trembled as she checked her phone. Blocked Horizon's internal system had shut down her staff login credentials. I'm locked out," she whispered. Panic blooming across her face. Everything's gone. Kevin tried to step toward the safe to retrieve Aisha's card, but Alelina raised her hand. "Stop right there," she commanded. "You're no longer authorized to handle guest property. Step away from the counter." Kevin hesitated, then backed off slowly. And then the final push. Gregory, boiling in embarrassment, lashed out. Doubt in the worst way possible. "Do you really think this circus makes you a leader?" He snarled at Aisha. "You tricked your way in. You humiliated us in public. You'll be sued for this." But his voice cracked just slightly when he said it. He was no longer in control, and he knew it. Aisha, still calm, tilted her head slightly. "You think leadership is about hiding things, Gregory, manipulating perception." She gestured to the guests around them. "Leadership is when people who've been ignored for too long finally speak up, and they're heard, right?" On cue, a woman in the crowd raised her voice. "You never took my complaint seriously." "Last spring," she said, "I emailed about an incident at check-in, and no one followed up. You were the one who responded and dismissed it." Gregory turned sharply to see her face, then looked away. Recognizing her, another voice, "I was charged twice for a room and got no response until I threatened legal action." A man chimed in from behind the lounge chairs. "I asked for an ADA compliant room and was told none were available. Then watched someone else check in and get one, and one-by-one guest voices became a chorus of past slights and denied accountability." Elena stepped forward again. "Now emboldened by truth and consequence, I logged 3 complaints in the last 2 months alone about biased behavior. At the front desk, they were dismissed. Every time Gregory signed off on the dismissals himself, Lauren backed up until she hit the wall, eyes darting between guests and her former co-workers. "Greg, what is this?" she whispered. They're turning on us." Gregory's voice was now reduced to a whimper. "They're just angry. This will blow over." But it didn't. It grew. Jacob panned his live stream across the lobby. "This is what a reckoning looks like," he said to his viewers. "They pushed too far, and now the guests are speaking." Then, the moment that cemented it all, Sophie Lynn pulled up her Reddit post, now viral. Hundreds of comments, dozens of reposts, screenshots of Kevin's intercom announcement. The quote, "This card is now company property." Beneath it, a clip of Lauren grabbing Aisha's arm, another of Gregory yelling, "People like her don't belong here." It was spreading like wildfire. "It's out there now," Sophie said aloud. "Everyone's seeing it." Gregory's desperation snapped again. He lunged toward the counter, shouting, "Delete that! That's private property." But 2 guests stepped in his path. One of them, a quiet man with reading glasses and a messenger bag, simply said, "No, you don't get to silence this." The other guest, an elderly woman in a floral shawl, held out her phone. "Your face is already online. Might want to think twice before making another threat." That was the tipping point. Lauren turned to Aisha, her voice shaking. "I didn't know." She said, "I didn't mean for this to happen." But Aisha didn't nod. She didn't offer comfort. She simply said, "You helped make it happen. You watched it happen." And then Gregory did something no one expected. He turned to Aisha, his voice ragged, shoulders slumping. "Why didn't you say who you were?" he asked. "You set us up." Aisha blinked. "No, I gave you every opportunity to treat me like any other guest. That was the test, and you failed it publicly." That was when Nia's voice returned now. On speaker, through Aisha's phone. "Aisha, the board's authorized full incident response, Carla's. Ready for your next steps?" Aisha looked across the lobby, scanning every stunned face. Every guest still holding a phone, still bearing witness patch her through Carla. Bennett's voice, crisp and measured, filled the air. "Gregory Vance, Lauren Hayes, Kevin Patel. Effective immediately. Your employment with Horizon Hospitality Group is terminated. Your access has been revoked. Legal documentation is being prepared. Ms. Carter will supervise next steps directly. All guests, please be advised. New leadership will be addressing your concerns. Momentarily, the weight of the words hit like thunder. Kevin tried one last protest. This is insane. We built this place, but Aisha cut him off. You built nothing. You guarded the door and turned away the very people we claim to serve. She turned to Elena. Please, unlock the safe. Retrieve. My card. Elena moved efficiently, professionally. She entered a new code, her own, and opened the safe. Aisha's black card lay untouched, pristine. Elena handed it back without a word, but her eyes were glassy with emotion. Then came the guests. One by one, they began clapping. Not loud, not chaotic, but purposeful, measured as if acknowledging something overdue. Aisha looked out over them and spoke not with anger, but with certainty. This wasn't just about me. This was about every guest who was told their presence was a problem, about every complaint that disappeared, every policy used to humiliate instead of serve. That ends today. Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin stood behind the counter, stripped of title, of power, of audience. And yet the consequences had only begun. Aisha turned back to her. Assistant, through the phone, Nia. We're proceeding with full lobby-level reform. Prepare the statement and elevate Elena Ruiz's status. She'll be leading this location. Yes, ma'am? Nia replied. And with that, Aisha Carter stepped forward. No longer mistaken, no longer anonymous. She had just taken her hotel back. One decision at a time. Aisha Carter stood at the center of the marble lobby, silent, composed, while the three disgraced employees she had just fired stood frozen behind the front desk. Faces pale, reputations shattered, and their power extinguished. Gregory's eyes, once filled with arrogant command, now flicked rapidly between the guests, the live streaming phones, and the woman he had just accused of being a fraud. Kevin stared blankly at the safe, now open and empty. Its only contents, a black card he had mocked, resting securely in Aisha's hand. Lauren had gone quiet, lips slightly parted, her gaze locked on the floor, no longer daring to meet anyone's eyes around them. The guests remained fixed in place, unwilling to turn away. The tension had not eased. It had evolved into anticipation, as if everyone in the room knew they were on the edge of something permanent. Aisha turned, slowly facing the crowd, then adjusting the hem of her plain black t-shirt. She stepped forward and spoke not for the cameras, not for applause, but with the clear, unwavering tone of a woman who had earned the right to every word. My name is Aisha Carter, she said. I am the founder and CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group, and as of this moment, I am reclaiming this hotel, not just from the people who misused their roles, but from every excuse they ever hid behind the words hit the lobby like a shockwave. Phones lowered slightly. Eyebrows rose. One guest audibly gasped. Another whispered, "She owns it, the whole company." Jacob's livestream comments exploded in real time. CEO, this just flipped everything. What a move. Gregory stumbled forward. Wait, this isn't how we do things. You're the CEO. You should have, there's protocol. There are procedures. You ambushed us. No, Aisha replied, never breaking eye contact. I walked in, like every other guest, quiet, alone, respectful. The only thing I didn't bring was privilege, and you proved, without prompting, how your team responds to someone who doesn't look the part. Kevin shook his head slowly. We didn't know. We couldn't have known. You didn't need to know, she snapped. That's the point. At that, Elena Ruiz stepped beside Aisha, her voice soft but certain. I recognized the name when she checked in. I saw the suite tag, the override clearance. I knew who she was, but I didn't speak up. Not right away. I'm sorry for that. Aisha turned to her. You did more than anyone else in this lobby. You told the truth. You stood up, and now you'll be promoted to guest services director for this property. Effective today, Elena's eyes widened, stunned. A few guests began to clap again, slower this time, not for spectacle, but for justice. A moment of quiet triumph unfolded in the lobby. Lauren spoke for the first time in minutes. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know what to do. Aisha regarded her carefully. You had a choice, Lauren. You made it when you pressed the intercom, when you grabbed my arm, when you laughed, when you watched your colleague lock away my card like I didn't matter. Then, without warning, Lauren cracked, "It was Gregory," she cried. He told us how to deal with people who didn't match our top-tier guests. He said we were just protecting the brand image. I thought it was normal. Gregory whipped his head around, furious. That's a lie. Aisha raised a hand, stopping them both. No, it's not a lie. It's a confession, and we will document it. Carla's voice returned over the call, steady and cool. We've logged the admission. This will be escalated to the compliance and legal teams. Few guests nodded in approval. One woman holding her toddler said aloud, "About time someone was held accountable." Jacob, still recording, spoke into the camera. She didn't just fire them. She exposed the whole system from the top down. Kevin stepped forward weakly. What happens to us now? You'll receive formal notice of termination, Aisha said. Your names will be flagged across Horizon's hiring network. You're banned from future employment with any of our properties, and if we discover prior misconduct covered up under your supervision, further action will follow. Gregory stared at her like a man who had just realized he had underestimated the wrong person. All this because you wanted to prove a point. No, she said coldly. All this because I'm tired of people like you, deciding who deserves respect based on appearances from the crowd. Sophie raised her voice. They tried to erase her, and now she's rewriting the rules. Aisha stepped aside, allowing Elena behind the front desk. Reset the check-in system. Suspend pending reservations flagged under Gregory's staff ID. We'll reach out to all affected guests and offer them compensation. Elena nodded and got to work. Hands steady now. Empowered. Aisha turned to the guests. If any of you experience mistreatment at this property today or before, our internal team will be stationed in the lobby. I've instructed Nia to open direct lines for all complaints, and we will respond within 48 hours. No form letters, no PR fluff, just answers. The room stood still, then began buzzing. Not with chaos, but clarity, guests murmured in agreement. One elderly man tipped his hat and said, "Thank you for not walking away." Aisha nodded gently. "I've walked away too many times, not anymore." Carla's voice came through again. Media outlets have picked up the footage. X and Reddit are circulating it without hashtags. The narrative is building, but you're in control. Aisha gave a firm nod. Let them talk. Let the public see what happens when a company doesn't just apologize, but acts. Then she turned back toward Gregory. Lauren and Kevin, you're dismissed. Your personal belongings will be sent to you. Security will escort you from the premises. You are not to speak to or approach any guests. Elena looked at her. Should I notify building security? No, Aisha replied. Let them walk through the lobby. Let every guest see the consequence of unchecked behavior. As the three former staff members moved through the lobby, under the weight of their own disgrace, no one stopped them. No one offered sympathy. Only the quiet murmurs of accountability followed them out. And once the doors closed behind them, Aisha turned back to her guests and her staff, not with relief, but with resolve. This wasn't justice. This was a beginning. Reform starts now. And with those words, Horizon Grand Hotel stopped being just a name carved in stone and became the place where everything changed the moment the glass doors sealed shut behind Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin. The energy in the Horizon Grand lobby shifted from confrontation to transformation. Guests stood quietly absorbing what they had just witnessed. A top-owned reckoning carried out, not behind closed doors, but right in front of them, under crystal chandeliers and beside gold-plated check-in counters. Aisha Carter, still composed in her plain black t-shirt and jeans, didn't pause. She turned to Elena Ruiz, now elevated from concierge to acting guest services director, and gave a clear directive. Initiate the reform plan. Start from the top. Elena, no longer hesitant, nodded and immediately began shutting down the existing reservation system. Disabling every user login associated with the terminated staff. Done. She confirmed within moments. Aisha pulled out her phone. Naya, she said firmly, send out the internal alert. Notify regional compliance, diversity, operations, and legal. I want a full audit of Horizon Grand's last 18 months, guest complaints, staff conduct records, and suppression logs. Nia's reply was instant, already in motion. The media's circling. But your voice is front and center. Carla's preparing the rollout. Briefing. Guests began to approach Elena, many speaking softly, unsure if it was appropriate to offer support. One woman, clutching a reservation confirmation printout, whispered, "Thank you. I was scared to speak earlier." Elena smiled gently. "We're listening now." In the corner, Jacob Reed's live stream showed steady growth, now past 10,000 viewers. His caption had updated to CEO reclaims hotel fires, entire staff and lobby. Real time. Reform comments flooded the screen. Sophie, now quiet for the first time since she began recording, approached Aisha with her phone lowered. "Do you want me to keep posting?" she asked. Aisha nodded. "Only truth. That's all I care about." Then she turned to the crowd. For years, Horizon Hospitality promised inclusion. But policies mean nothing if bias is ignored behind the desk. Today that changes. She looked to Elena again. Reassign all staff training to begin. Within 72 hours, we'll bring in an independent firm, and every employee front desk, concierge management will undergo re-certification. No grandfather clauses, no excuses. As Aisha spoke, Carla's voice came through on speaker. "Once more, we've approved your full reform plan. Local media is requesting a statement. We've confirmed your authority to implement procedural suspension of current operations for guest safety." Aisha replied, "Then suspend front desk bookings. Temporarily. Elena will manually handle VIP guests. Others will be redirected to our downtown partner location with a complimentary night." She turned to Elena. "You okay with that?" Load. Elena gave a single steady nod. "More than okay?" Around them, guests no longer looked like spectators. They looked like supporters. One man offered to help with luggage. A couple volunteered to pass out water bottles to waiting guests. From confrontation had grown cohesion. The lobby had become something different now. Part recovery room, part headquarters. And then came the twist that hardened Aisha's calm into something sharper. A notification pinged on her screen. An internal flag from compliance. She opened it quietly, scanning the summary, her jaw set as she read. Then she lifted her eyes and said to no one in particular, Gregory didn't act alone. The lobby paused again. Carla's voice returned in her earpiece. This time, lower, urgent. We've pulled Horizon Grand's archived complaint records. Gregory submitted false summaries to regional headquarters. Complaints that were marked resolved were never investigated. And we found communications between him and former regional director Michael Turner. Aisha's voice dropped colder. Now Turner retired 3 months ago. Under a cloud of HR violations, no one looked deeper, because they said he was just old-fashioned. Nye's voice came in. Turns out he protected Gregory Lauren too. There was a pattern. Aisha closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to steady herself. Then she opened them, crystal clear, with resolve. We're not just reforming this location, she said. We're initiating a full Horizon-wide review. Every flagged employee, every buried complaint, every fake resolution. She turned to Jacob, who was still filming. You can show this part, she said. People need to know that rot starts from the root, and we're digging it out. The guests around her nodded. Some looked stunned. Others, relieved. One woman in her 70s whispered, I've waited years to see someone in charge actually do something. Sophie turned to her stream. We came for a vacation, she said, but we witnessed a revolution. Aisha glanced around the lobby. She didn't see walls and marble anymore. She saw a symbol of what hospitality could be and what it had failed to protect for far too long. This hotel was never broken because of its decor or design. She said it was broken because people were trained to smile at some guests and interrogate others. Her eyes moved across the room. That era ends today, and the rebuilding began 3 months later. The Horizon Grand Hotel no longer resembled the place where Aisha Carter had been humiliated in front of dozens of strangers. The marble floors remained polished. The chandeliers still glittered, and the velvet chairs still invited guests to sink into quiet luxury. But the silence that once carried judgment now carried welcome. A framed portrait of Aisha now hung near the check-in desk. Not for vanity, but for accountability. Beneath it, a plaque read, This space belongs to every guest, no exceptions. Guests walked in and out without fear of being second-guessed based on appearance, accent, or attire. And behind the desk stood Elena Ruiz, now permanently appointed general manager, not just as recognition of courage, but because she redefined what leadership looked like at Horizon. The reform Aisha implemented rippled far beyond Seattle. Horizon Hospitality Group launched a sweeping initiative auditing all 57 of its properties across the U.S. Dozens of previously ignored complaints resurfaced, and new staff-wide training protocols were enforced. Company-wide, each hotel adopted a new equity compliance panel, rotating guest advisors, anonymous feedback systems, and zero-tolerance enforcement with real accountability. As for the guests who had witnessed the incident that day, they received personal letters of thanks and follow-up calls, not from public relations interns, but from Aisha herself. You stood when others looked away. One message read, That matters. Sophie Lynn and Jacob Reed, whose live streams had ignited national media coverage without a single hashtag, were invited to speak at Horizon's Internal Leadership Summit, where they emphasize the power of real-time accountability. We didn't set out to expose anything Jacob had said on stage. We just refused to put our phones down. But even as the company transformed, the past refused to stay buried. 1 week after the incident, Aisha received a quiet message from a former hotel manager in Portland, a man who had worked under Gregory years before. His voice, low with guilt, confessed something that cast everything in a darker light. Gregory wasn't just following his own bias. He admitted there was a quiet directive from regional leadership. Turner's era, they wanted certain guests treated as non-priority if they didn't match the profile. It wasn't on paper, but we all knew. Aisha didn't respond with anger. She thanked him for telling the truth and passed the statement to Carla and the legal team, but that single admission revealed the final twist in the story. The Horizon Grand scandal had never been about one man abusing his power. It was about a system that had quietly enabled it. As news of the confession spread, former employees from other branches began to speak up. An internal Horizon task force was formed to re-enter staff dismissed under questionable circumstances. Several were reinstated. Others received settlements. Aisha made sure no one was hired or fired again without a paper trail. And every new manager went through direct accountability orientation. It takes more than policies to rebuild trust. She told her board, "It takes proof that silence won't be rewarded and that telling the truth won't cost you your job." Aisha's own legacy shifted too. Once known as a discreet billionaire who built a hospitality empire from grit and strategy, she was now publicly celebrated as a reformer. Not because she sought the spotlight, but because she had finally stepped into it to make change permanent. She launched a new division within Horizon Forward, a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative focused not on slogans, but measurable outcomes under its first act. Elena Ruiz was named National Advisor for Frontline Guest Experience, and at the end of the inaugural summit, Aisha said the words that guests, staff, and survivors of silent discrimination across the country would never forget. Hospitality doesn't begin with the smile you give. It begins with the respect you assume. The audience rose to their feet, not because a CEO had spoken, but because a woman once pushed toward the exit had turned around and opened the door for everyone else. If you believe everyone deserves respect, share this story. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and speak up when silence is no longer an option. Who let him cry like that? The voice wasn't just loud, it thundered through the marble corridors of the mansion. Preston Vale. His words sliced through the silence so sharply, it felt like even the air flinched. The kind of voice that didn't ask questions, it demanded answers. The cry had echoed first, high-pitched, desperate. Not the sound of a fussy toddler, not hunger, not sleepiness. This was something else. Pure panic, like someone was drowning in their own skin. Maya William froze her hand mid-swipe against the window pane on the second floor. The microfiber cloth she held was still damp, but her fingers had gone cold. 5 days. That's how long she'd been cleaning this mansion. Long enough to learn one thing. Nobody, and I mean nobody, ever talked about the 5th floor. In fact, most of the staff avoided it entirely. Some whispered that it was cursed. Others just pretended it didn't exist. Stay on the east wing, scrub your floors, mind your business. That was the rule. But that sound wasn't something you could ignore. "Miss," the butler's voice floated up the staircase, tight and urgent. "Stay clear of the upper wing." But Maya didn't answer. Her feet moved before her brain could stop them. Step after step, she climbed higher, heart hammering, her mind screaming at her to turn back. And then at the end of the long hallway, a door cracked open, light flickering from some kind of sensory projector on the ceiling. Shadows danced across the walls in an eerie rhythm. And there he was, a little boy, maybe 7, curled up on the carpet, rocking, hard, over and over, his small forehead smacking rhythmically against a bookshelf, over and over and over. His hands clenched, his tiny frame shuddering with every gasp, every cry that ripped from his throat like it was trying to crawl out of him. No one was there, no one comforting him, No one even watching. Maya stood frozen at the threshold. Every part of her body told her to turn around. Run! This wasn't her business. This wasn't in the job description. But something deeper, something old kept her rooted. A memory. Her brother, Germain. The same rocking. The same sound. She remembered it. Oh, she remembered it too well. Her baby brother under the dining room table, arms locked across his chest, tears streaking down his tiny face. Everyone said he was broken, weird, lost. But he wasn't. He just needed someone to speak his language. Hey, sweetheart, Maya whispered, crouching down just inside the doorway, her voice soft. Careful. I'm not going to touch you. Just sitting right here, okay? The boy didn't look, didn't move, but something shifted. His rocking slowed barely, but it slowed. She kept her hands where he could see them. Open, palms up. No threat. Then, without thinking, like muscle memory, from a life she thought she'd left behind, Maya raised one hand slowly and signed a simple word across her chest. Safe, a sign her grandmother used to teach Germain when words weren't enough. When the world got too loud, too bright, too much, the boy paused just for a second. His eyes flickered toward her, then back down. The rocking slowed even more. But before anything else could happen, what the hell are you doing? The voice snapped through the air like a whip. Maya flinched hard, spinning toward the doorway. Preston Vale stood there, all sharp edges and tailored perfection. His suit flawless, his grip white-knuckled around the doorknob like he might rip it clean off. Phone in one hand, fury in the other. Maya stumbled to her feet. I heard him crying, I thought. And who gave you permission to be in this room? No one. He sounded like he was in trouble. Step away from my son. Son. Her body stiffened, but she backed away, palms raised. Yes, sir. Of course. Preston strode forward, reaching for the boy. But the moment his hands touched the child, chaos. Screaming, kicking, clawing, the boy's entire body turned into a whirlwind of panic. His arms flailed, his legs struck out, wild, terrified, pure meltdown. What's wrong with him? Preston grunted, trying to hold him, but the boy's tiny fists hammered his chest. Why does he do this? May I? Maya asked. Her voice was quiet but firm. Stepping forward just enough, Preston didn't stop her. She crouched. Slowly. Let the boy see her. Let him hear her breath, calm, steady, safe. And the second her presence hit him, the second he recognized her, his screams broke. Just broke. Mid-wail, gone. He twisted toward her, crawled, threw himself against her, like a drowning child finding shore. His tiny hands latched onto her sleeve, his face buried deep into her shoulder. His breath hitched, then slowed. Then, silence. Not the heavy silence of pain, the soft, exhausted silence of safety. Maya held him, rocked him, whispered nothing words, just sound, just rhythm. Preston stood there, staring, stunned. What did you just do? His voice cracked. Disbelief tangled in the edges. I didn't do anything, Maya murmured. I just listened. Do you know sign language? A little, she said softly. My brother, he was nonverbal autistic. This helped him. Sometimes words are just too big. Preston's posture shifted. His whole frame looked smaller somehow. His perfect suit suddenly felt like a costume 2 sizes too tight. What's your name? Maya. Maya William. I clean the East Wing. You're not a therapist. She shook her head. No, sir. Just a cleaner. His jaw worked, trying to form something, but no words came. Instead, he said, Can you stay a little longer? Maya nodded. Yes, sir, she whispered, her arms tightening around the boy, whose name she didn't even know yet. And as Preston stepped out of the room, his footsteps quieter than they'd ever been. The mansion fell still. For the first time in who knows how long, no echoes of pain, no slammed doors, just stillness. And in that stillness, something shifted. Something began. Part 2. A job that was never meant to be hers. The sun was already dipping lower by the time Maya finally descended the stairs again. Her arms ached slightly from holding the boy Eli. She'd caught his name earlier when Preston muttered it under his breath during the chaos. Eli. It fit him somehow. Small, simple, soft. Eli had eventually fallen asleep. Not in his bed, not on a couch, but right there in her arms, like that was the only place in the entire mansion where the noise of the world couldn't find him. She'd laid him gently on a beanbag in the corner of his room, pulling a heavy weighted blanket, one she'd found folded neatly in the closet over him. His tiny fingers clung to the edge until sleep finally pulled him under. The mansion felt different now, not just heavy, not just cold marble and echoing footsteps. No. It felt like a place where something was holding its breath, waiting. Maya wiped her palms on her uniform and turned toward the service hallway, fully expecting this to be her last walk down it. She had no doubt what was coming next. She'd crossed a line. No, she jumped over it, waved at it on the way down, and set it on fire. Miss William. Her heart skipped. The voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Clipped. Controlled. She turned, and there was Preston Vale. Arms folded, posture stiff. His expression unreadable, except for the tension at his jaw. The man looked like a spreadsheet come to life, every line perfectly aligned, every emotion perfectly hidden behind that tailored gray armor he wore. She started, but couldn't finish. In my office, he said. Not a question, not a request, just command. She nodded, throat tight. Yes, sir. He turned sharply and strode toward the double doors at the far end of the hallway. Maya followed. Her shoes clicked too loud against the marble floor. Her breath felt too loud in her chest. She'd only ever seen the office from the outside, dusted its doorknob, polished the glass shelves. Now, she stepped inside, and it was everything she imagined, immaculate. Dark wood shelves filled with books that looked like no one had ever actually read them. A massive polished desk, a wall of windows that overlooked the private garden. Everything was curated, controlled, perfect. Preston gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit. Maya obeyed, folding her hands tightly in her lap. Every instinct screamed at her to brace. This wasn't just going to be a reprimand. This was going to be a firing. Maybe worse. There were NDAs involved in working for people like Preston Vale. She could practically hear the pen-scribbling breach of contract somewhere. But instead of opening a folder or turning on his laptop, Preston just sat, silent, tapped a pen against his notepad. Tick, tick, tick. Somewhere behind her, a grandfather clock echoed the same rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It felt like waiting for a sentence in court. Only she didn't know if she was the witness, the defendant, or both. You handled him like you've done it 100 times, Preston said finally. His voice was quiet. No sharp edges now. Just something else. Maya shook her head. No, sir. Not with him. But with someone like him. Your brother. Yes, Jermaine. Her throat tightened, but she kept her gaze steady. He passed. 4 years ago. He was 10. Preston's eyes flicked up from the notepad. For a brief moment, something human flickered across his face. Not the CEO. Not the businessman. Just a man. A father. I'm sorry. Thank you. He was silent again, staring at the pad, then leaned back in his chair. His posture shifted like the weight of his own suit suddenly didn't fit. No therapist, no specialist, no trained professional has been able to calm Eli down like that. Not in 2 years. He shook his head, half to himself. They all failed. And you walked in with a rag in your hand and— I didn't fix him. Maya cut in gently. I didn't fix anything, sir. I just saw him. That stopped him cold. The pen he'd been tapping fell still. You saw him, he repeated, like it was a foreign language. She nodded. Children like Eli, they don't need to be fixed. They need to be heard. You can't rush their silence. You have to be willing to sit in it with them. Preston blinked, slowly, processing. You sound like someone who should be doing a lot more than mopping floors, he muttered. I'm just someone who needed a job, sir. My grandmother's got medical bills. This pays better than waiting tables. He nodded slowly, looked down at the notepad like it had answers but found none. Then without warning, he closed it, firmly. I want to make you an offer. Maya blinked. Sir. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I need someone who can connect with Eli. Someone who can be consistent. Not another overqualified stranger with a clipboard. Someone he already trusts. His eyes bore into hers. I don't need a nanny. I'm not a nanny. Good. I don't need one. I need you. Her breath caught. Her heart did this weird flutter thing. Sir, with all due respect, I'll double your pay. He didn't even let her finish. Private room in the staff wing. All expenses covered. Weekends off. Health insurance if you don't already have it. And you'll never pick up a mop again. Maya stared. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The numbers danced in her head. The possibilities. This could mean real treatment for Grandma Loretta. No more skipped medications. No more choosing between rent and groceries. But it also meant a boy. A fragile boy with patterns more delicate than lace, and trust even more fragile. And if she failed him, it wouldn't just be another employee leaving. It would be betrayal. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Preston's gaze didn't waver. He leaned in further. Look, I've hired behaviorists from Stanford, nannies from agencies that only serve the ultra-rich, a family counselor who charges $2,000 an hour. None of them lasted more than a week. His voice softened. You walked in, said nothing, and my son laid his head on your shoulder. Maya swallowed hard. It's not magic, sir, she said quietly. It's just care. Preston exhaled, a breath that sounded like it came from the very bottom of his soul. That he murmured is even rarer. Maya looked down at her hands. Chipped nail polish. Calloused palms. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Baby, if God opens a door, don't stand there arguing about the knob. She lifted her chin. When would I start? Preston didn't even pause. Tomorrow morning. I'll have the room prepared tonight. Maya nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. He stood, extended his hand. She shook it. Small, firm. And as she left the office, her mind spinning, her stomach tight, something quiet stirred beneath all the noise. Purpose. Part 3. The first day of something bigger. The next morning felt surreal. Maya stood at the entrance of the East Staff Wing, gripping a small duffel bag in one hand and a cardboard box tucked awkwardly under her arm. Her life was in this box. 3 changes of clothes, a pair of sneakers, some toiletries, and a framed photo of her grandmother Loretta. That was it. That's all she owned that mattered. The housekeeper, Mrs. Green, a kind-faced woman in her late 50s, met her at the hallway entrance with a faint smile and a keycard in her hand. Mr. Vale had this redone last night, she said, pressing the card into Maya's palm. Said you were important. Maya blinked. Important. She half laughed. I'm just— Mrs. Green raised a brow. Honey, he don't give staff rooms to just anybody. Don't sell yourself short. The room was simple, clean, but cozy. A twin bed with crisp white sheets. A reading chair by the window. A small desk with a notepad and pen already set neatly on top. Someone had even placed a tiny vase of fresh flowers on the dresser. Maya placed her box on the bed and carefully unpacked. Clothes on hangers, toiletries in the bathroom. The framed photo of Loretta went on the nightstand. She paused, staring at it for a moment, letting her fingers brush over the glass. "I hope you're watching this," she whispered, "because I don't know what I've gotten myself into." By 9:30 a.m., she stood in front of Eli's nursery door. Her hands felt clammy. Her stomach fluttered with that odd mixture of excitement and terror that only happens when you realize your life just changed forever. Deep breath. She pushed the door open. Eli was awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, completely focused on organizing colored blocks into two piles, red and blue. His little hands worked quickly, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Maya stepped inside slowly, not making a sound. "Morning, Eli," she said softly. He didn't look up, but he paused. Just a half second, then kept sorting. Good, that was progress. Silence was better than screaming, better than hiding. Maya eased down onto the floor, cross-legged, a few feet away, careful not to invade his space. No sudden moves, no pressure. For a few quiet minutes, it was just the two of them. Block, block, red, blue, a rhythm. Then, something small, something important. Eli nudged a red block toward her. Not through, not shoved. Nudged. With his foot. Maya blinked. A smile tugged at her lips. "Well, thank you," she whispered. She picked up a blue block and gently nudged it back toward him with her toe. His eyes flicked up just for a moment, but that was enough. Enough to start a game. A silent language neither of them had to learn. They already knew it. Back and forth. Red, blue. No words, no pressure. Just presence. Hours passed like that. Quiet, simple, healing. At one point, Maya started humming softly an old gospel tune her grandmother used to sing while stirring pots in the kitchen. Just a gentle sound meant for no one but herself. But Eli leaned in. Barely. But it was there. The kind of lean you give toward a fire on a cold day. Small, instinctive, comfort-seeking. She didn't stop humming, didn't stop the rhythm. From the doorway, unseen, Preston watched. He had come upstairs with every intention of checking in on them, maybe even offering advice or asking if Eli had eaten yet. But the moment he saw the scene, he froze. His son wasn't screaming. His son wasn't panicking. He was playing, sitting there, feet tapping fingers, sorting blocks. His head tilted ever so slightly toward Maya, like a sunflower toward the sun. Preston didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched, and something tightened in his chest. Not grief, not fear, something else. Hope. It scared him more than grief ever had. Says, by mid-afternoon, the routine had shifted into something natural. Maya stood by the window, while Eli worked quietly on a wooden puzzle. Her arms folded loosely, her gaze out toward the garden. It wasn't raining, but the clouds hung low, soft silver, like the whole world was hushed. No meltdowns, no screaming, no hitting, no frantic running in circles. Not today. And for Maya, that felt like a miracle. Behind her, footsteps approached. Not hurried, not stomping, just soft. She turned. Preston, but not Preston in a suit. Not the rigid, untouchable CEO she'd met 5 days ago. This Preston wore gray slacks, a white button-down sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie, no jacket, just him. How was he today? His voice was different, quieter, less bark, more breath. Maya smiled faintly. Peaceful. No meltdowns, no biting, No hitting. Just steady. Preston stepped farther into the room, his eyes settling on his son, who was now lying on his stomach, carefully pushing a toy train along the track. I don't know what you're doing, he muttered, watching, but it's, working. Maya didn't look away from Eli. It's not a trick, Mr. Vale. He nodded. I know. It's time. It's presence. It's letting him lead. Preston was silent for a long moment. His gaze stayed fixed on his son. But his mind was somewhere else. He used to love trains, he said quietly. My wife, Emma, she'd take him to the railroad museum every other Saturday. Maya's head turned. Slowly. Preston didn't meet her gaze. He stared out the window, now eyes distant. He hasn't asked to go. Since she passed, he finished. His voice was even. Too even. Maya didn't answer, didn't push. Some silences were meant to be shared, not filled. I thought we were doing okay, Preston continued after a moment. After the funeral, I hired the best therapists, paid for the best programs. I spared nothing. Thought I could fix it. Thought if I just threw enough money at the problem would go away. Maya's voice was gentle. Grief doesn't work like that. He finally looked at her. No, she said softly. It doesn't. Not for you. Not for him. Preston's eyes dropped back to Eli. Do you think he remembers her? Maya tilted her head, considering. I think he feels her absence. Whether or not he can explain it, he knows. Preston sat slowly in the armchair by the bookshelf, hands steepled, eyes locked on the tiny figure pushing the train along the track. We were married for 10 years, he said suddenly. Met in college. She was chaos, in the best way. Laughed too loud, danced barefoot in the rain, made pancakes at midnight. Maya smiled soft and genuine. She sounds wonderful. She was, Preston murmured, and something deep cracked in his voice. For a brief second, Eli looked up. Not long, but enough to lock eyes with his father. Preston inhaled sharply, then stood, walked over, crouched beside his son. Hey, bud, he said softly. How's the train coming? Eli didn't speak, didn't react, but he didn't pull away either. For Preston, that was everything. He turned to Maya, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you think he'll ever talk again? Maya didn't hesitate. I think he already is. Part 4. The quiet language of trust. That night, the house was quieter than it had ever been. But it wasn't the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that used to haunt the marble halls. No, this was different. It was the kind of quiet where peace lived. Maya sat in her room, curled up in the small reading chair by the window, fingers trailing absent-mindedly over the worn edges of her grandmother's photo frame. She stared out at the garden where the moonlight caught the tops of the camellias in bloom, their petals swaying gently in the breeze. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Mrs. Green stood there holding a tray with a covered plate and a folded cloth napkin. Mr. Vale said you skipped dinner, the housekeeper said, voice lighter than usual. He insisted you eat something proper. Maya blinked. I didn't realize. Didn't think you did. Been a busy day. Mrs. Green's eyes softened, almost approving. He doesn't do that for just anyone you know. Maya smiled, taking the tray. Thank you. Don't get too comfortable, Mrs. Green added with a knowing smirk. Mr. Vale's moods, they change with the wind. Maya chuckled, settling the tray on her desk. Trust me, I don't expect anything. But as she sat down, uncovering grilled salmon, roasted sweet potatoes, and steamed green beans, she realized she did expect something, or at least hoped, because today had been more than a job. It had been something real, something sacred, something healing for her and for them. She ate in silence, the weight of the day slowly softening. But beneath the exhaustion was something steady. Purpose. She was meant to be here. Fess. The next morning, Maya was at Eli's nursery door by 8:30 sharp. The nerves that had gripped her yesterday were gone, replaced by a calm kind of determination. This wasn't just work anymore. This was a commitment, a promise. When she pushed open the door, Eli was already awake. Sitting by the window, fingers tracing invisible shapes on the glass as morning sunlight filtered in, spilling across the floor like gold dust. "Good morning," Eli Maya said softly. He didn't look up, but he didn't stiffen either. That was enough. She sat cross-legged a few feet away, careful not to crowd his space. Quiet, present. After a few minutes, she pulled a small whiteboard from her tote bag and a dry erase marker. "I thought we could try something new," she said gently. She drew a simple sun, then a cloud, then a heart. Eli watched, didn't move, but didn't retreat. Then, slowly, carefully, Maya handed him the marker. For a long moment, he just held it, his tiny fingers rolling it back and forth. Then, slowly, he drew a crooked little star. Maya blinked. Her throat tightened. "That's beautiful," she whispered. From the hallway, Preston stood just out of sight. His hand hovered near the doorknob, but he didn't open it. He just watched. Watched the way Maya's presence had become something steady for his son. Something safe. Something rare. And something inside him shifted again. Slowly. Painfully. Like an old hinge learning how to move after being rusted shut. He turned away before they noticed him, but his mind stayed in that room. That night, after Eli fell asleep, Preston sat in his study. A glass of scotch rested on the desk untouched. His laptop sat open, but the screen was dark. Instead, in his hands was a manila folder, Maya's employment file. He opened it. Inside, a copy of her application, her background check. A handwritten reference letter from her old manager at the diner back in Queens. Preston unfolded it, read it twice. She's not fancy, but she shows up early, stays late, and never complains. She's kind, and she listens, even when people don't know how to talk. He sat back in his chair staring at the paper. His chest ached, not with grief, not with regret, with something else. He set the paper down and leaned back. The wind stirred the branches outside. The house, this perfect, polished house, had never felt so alive, or so human. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like comfort. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Maya had stepped into a role that was never supposed to be hers. And in that time, something remarkable had happened. Her presence wasn't a fluke anymore. It was a necessity. Each morning she arrived with the same gentle rhythm. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. And in return, Eli gave her more. Not words. Not yet, but his eyes followed her now. He offered her things, a block, a button, a puzzle piece, as if they were his own little vocabulary. His way of saying, "I trust you." That morning, Maya laid out a new activity, a soft foam mat, containers of scented clay, a series of cards with cartoon faces, happy, sad, scared, calm. "This one's happy," she said, holding it up. "Happy. Like when music plays." Eli touched the card, then, slowly, pressed it to his own chest. Maya's breath caught. "That's right," she whispered. "That's right, baby." When Preston came home that evening, the house felt different. Not silent in the way it used to be. Not hollow. It hummed. Soft. Subtle. But unmistakably alive. From the kitchen, jazz floated from a small speaker. The windows were cracked open. Warm air drifted in. And somewhere upstairs, a laugh. Not loud, not perfect, but a laugh. Preston stopped in the entryway. His keys slipped from his hand onto the marble table. That sound, that tiny breathy giggle, it was real. He followed it, slowly, quietly, like approaching something wild and precious. In the living room, Maya sat cross-legged on the floor. One hand held a sock puppet, the other a toy giraffe. She bounced them back and forth in a silly, clumsy fight over a pretend teacup. "No, it's my tea," the giraffe squeaked. The sock puppet flopped over dramatically with a little oof. Eli, seated across from her, watched with wide eyes. Then his mouth stretched. No sound, just a grin, a full radiant smile. Preston's breath hitched. Maya noticed him in the doorway, straightened a little, brushed lint from her slacks. "Mr. Vale," she said, a little breathless, "I didn't hear you come in." Preston didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on Eli. Was that him laughing?" "Sort of," Maya replied softly. "No sound. But he's getting close." Preston crouched beside his son. "Hey, buddy," he said. Eli didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He reached out tiny fingers, brushing Preston's shirt, then went right back to his toy. Preston swallowed hard. He's trusting you more," Maya said. Preston nodded. "I haven't seen him like this since—" His voice faltered. He didn't finish. Maya gave a faint smile. "I'm not doing anything you couldn't do," she said. That, Preston replied quietly, is the part I find hardest to believe. Part 5. A father learning to listen. Later that night, long after the sun dipped behind the hills and the house grew quiet, Maya found herself in the little garden behind the staff wing. She sat on the old wooden bench beneath the magnolia tree, a warm mug of tea between her palms, her eyes tracing the stars blinking through the soft velvet sky. She hadn't expected this. Not any of it. When she took the job, it was supposed to be simple. Temporary. Clean some windows. Scrub some floors. Make enough to help with Grandma Loretta's medical bills. Nothing more. And yet, here she was, wrapped up in something bigger, something deeper, something that felt permanent. She was growing roots, and it terrified her. The garden gate creaked behind her. Maya turned, expecting Mrs. Green. It wasn't. It was Preston. He wasn't in his usual tailored armor. No suit, no tie, just a soft gray sweater and worn jeans. Something about seeing him like this unguarded human made her chest tighten in a way she didn't entirely understand. "I figured you'd be out here," he said, lifting a second mug. "Chamomile, if you want it." Maya blinked, surprised. "That's thoughtful." "I figured it's either that or the bourbon in my office." Preston chuckled softly. "And you don't strike me as a bourbon before bed kind of person." She laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. "No, one sip, and I'd be out cold." Preston sat down beside her. Not too close, not imposing, just near. A silence settled, not awkward, not heavy, just safe. "I've been meaning to ask," Preston said finally, his voice softer, now more careful. "Your brother, what happened?" Maya exhaled, looked down into her cup. "Jermaine had a seizure. Complications from an infection. He passed in the hospital while I was filling out paperwork for his insurance." Preston flinched. I'm so sorry." "Thank you." Her voice was steady. "He was the only person in the world who ever saw me," without expecting anything back. Preston was quiet for a moment. Then, "That sounds a lot like Eli." "Yeah," she whispered. "It does." The breeze shifted. Magnolia petals drifted down like snow. Preston ran a hand through his hair. "You make this look easy, but I know it's not. I know I'm not easy. I know this house. Eli's challenges, me. It can be overwhelming." Maya turned to him. "You're not difficult, Preston. You're just grieving, in the only way you know how." His eyes snapped to hers. "Call me Preston," he said quietly. "Please." She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Preston. Another long pause. Then his voice barely above a whisper. I want to learn. Maya blinked. Learn everything, Preston said, looking at her eyes raw. I want to know what you know. About him. About how to reach him. Her heartbeat thumped. Fast. Unsteady. You're already halfway there, she whispered. No, he shook his head. No. I watch you with him. The way you read his cues. The way you understand what he needs before he asks. I don't have that. You don't need instinct, Maya said. You just need willingness and patience. And he'll teach you if you listen. Preston looked at her. Really looked at her. I want to try, he said quietly. And for the first time since they met, Maya didn't see the CEO, or the grieving husband, or the desperate father. She saw a man, uncertain, flawed, but finally ready. The next morning, something shifted. Preston was waiting at the nursery door before Maya arrived. His sleeves were already rolled. His face was different, not tight, not guarded, but open, present. Mind if I join today? He asked, a little sheepish. Maya smiled. Not at all. They started small. Basic sign language. More, stop, help, love. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor. Preston knelt beside her, copying her movements, clumsy but earnest. Eli watched from a few feet away, studying them like a curious bird perched on a fence. His eyes flicked between Maya's hands and his father's. More, Preston signed. His fingers wobbled through the motion, but landed close enough. Eli blinked. Then, slowly, his tiny hands lifted, and he signed it back. Not perfect, but there. Preston's breath hitched. His eyes shimmered. But he didn't say a word. He just nodded, smiled, and reached for his son's hand. It was quiet. It was imperfect. It was everything. Later that evening, Maya sat by her window, scribbling into her battered journal. He's coming back to his son, she wrote, not as a savior, not as a fixer, but as a father learning a new language. One built on silence, trust, and steady hands. A knock pulled her from the page. She opened the door to find Preston standing there. In his hands, an old, worn parenting book. I found this in Emma's things, he said. It's about parenting children with sensory disorders. I thought maybe we could read it together. Maya took it. Gentle. Careful. I'd like that. Then, before turning to go, Preston added softer than anything else. Thank you for staying. She held the book against her chest as he walked away, closed her door, and realized she wasn't just staying. She was building something, slowly, quietly, like trust, like laughter, like family. Part 6. Where the Heart Lived. The early summer light streamed through the nursery windows, warm and gentle, casting soft golden beams onto the wooden floor. Maya sat cross-legged on the foam mat, smoothing out a patch of kinetic sand, while Eli pressed animal molds into it. It had become part of their morning routine, sensory time before breakfast. A calm, grounding ritual. Something predictable. Something safe. Eli didn't speak. He hadn't yet. But his hands were steadier, his movements less frantic, and the way his gaze followed Maya's every gesture. It was a language all its own. Maya signed with her fingers, shaping her hands into horns. Eli didn't copy exactly, but he reached for the tiny plastic cow and pressed it into the sand. His focus was sharp, intentional. Preston knelt beside them watching, not from the doorway, not from a distance. Right there, elbows on his knees, no phone in sight, no email distractions. Just there. Maya smiled. See, he's getting it. Preston shook his head. a smile tugging at his lips. So are you. They sat like that for nearly an hour. No rush, no pressure, just the quiet rhythm of play. When Eli started to show signs of fatigue, his fingers slowing his gaze, drifting, Maya gently packed up the sand while Preston fetched his weighted blanket. Together, they helped Eli settle onto the couch in the sunroom, where he curled up with his stuffed bear and drifted to sleep. Preston stood there for a moment, looking down at his son, his expression softer than Maya had ever seen it. Less like a man fighting the world, more like a man learning to hold it. "You hungry?" he asked, glancing her way. Starving Maya chuckled. "Walk with me." She hesitated for a beat, unsure if this was still professional. But then she nodded. "Yeah, sure." They strolled through the back garden, past the manicured hedges. The roses Emma had planted years ago still bloomed along the fence line, their petals blushing deep pink. Preston had rolled up his sleeves. His hands stayed tucked in his pockets. And for once, he didn't look like Preston Vale, CEO of Caldwell Dynamics. He just looked like a man, barefoot in grief, barefoot in hope. "I got a call this morning," he said, breaking the quiet. "Eli's therapist." Maya glanced at him. "Yeah," she said. "His developmental milestones are still delayed, but," she noted, "significant behavioral improvements. Big ones. Things she hasn't seen in him for years." Maya smiled, small and knowing. "He's beginning to trust again." Preston nodded, his gaze on the gravel path beneath their feet. She asked what changed, and Maya tilted her head. "I told her it was you." Maya chuckled, brushing a braid back behind her ear. "I'm just one part of it." "No," Preston said, stopping, turning toward her. "You're the part that matters." Maya's breath caught. She opened her mouth, maybe to push it away, maybe to laugh it off. But the way he was looking at her stopped her. His eyes weren't guarded, not distant. They were honest, wide open. "Before Emma died," Preston's started voice lower. Now she used to say, "I was always 2 steps behind, always looking at what came next. Never what was right in front of me." Maya didn't interrupt, just listened. She handled everything. The therapy, the appointments, the routines. "I wrote the checks. That was my role. That's what I told myself." His hands tightened into fists in his pockets. "And when she got sick, I panicked. I thought if I could just control everything, schedule it, structure it, I could stop it from falling apart." His voice broke barely above a whisper. "I was wrong." Maya inhaled slowly. "Grief makes us grasp for anything that doesn't move, because what moves might disappear." Preston looked at her sharply, then slowly nodded. "You speak like someone who's lost someone," he said. She smiled, sad but real. Someone who's lost. Someone. They stood there, in that small stretch of garden. No wind, no birdsong. Just the gentle hum of something raw and unspoken between them. Maya reached out. Her fingers brushed a blooming camellia. "These used to grow outside my grandmother's porch," she murmured. She said they were stubborn flowers, bloomed when they felt like it, not when others expected. Preston glanced at her. "Sounds familiar?" Her smile deepened. "Yeah, it does." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya found herself in Preston's study, a place that had once felt off-limits, intimidating. Now, it just felt quiet, lived in. Preston set a USB drive on the desk. "I found this in one of Emma's old therapy binders," he said. "She filmed everything. Notes, videos, progress, struggles, all of it." Maya picked up the drive, turning it over in her palm. "Want to see?" She nodded. He plugged it in, clicked open the first video, and there, on the screen, was a much younger Eli, maybe 4, sitting at a low table with a therapist. His hair was longer, his cheeks still round with baby fat. Emma's voice floated from behind the camera. Gentle, patient. Okay, baby. Show Daddy more. Remember, hands together. Tiny Eli clapped his hands together, then opened them. Preston's younger self leaned in from the side, clumsy but trying. More, he echoed. Emma laughed. Bright. Easy. That's it. Good job, baby. Maya glanced at Preston. His face had gone pale, his jaw tight. I forgot about this, he said. I haven't watched these since before. His voice trailed. She was good with him, Maya said quietly. Really, really good. She was. His throat tightened. Everything. He stood, pacing, running both hands through his hair. I erased her from this house, from everything. I packed it all away. The videos, the toys, the routines. Maya stood too, walked slowly to him. No, you didn't, she said softly. You were surviving. You were breaking open in silence. He turned. His eyes searched hers. And you? Are you healing? She paused. I think so, she whispered. Some days, more than others. For a long moment, nothing. Then slowly, gently. Preston reached out. His fingers brushed hers. Tentative. A question. Maya didn't pull away. It was an answer. Not a declaration. Not yet. But something older. Something deeper. Connection. The kind that doesn't need words. Part 7. The moment everything shifted. That night, neither of them slept. Not really. Maya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her hands folded over her chest. Her heart beating louder than the silence around her. Her mind spun in loops around Preston's words, around the way his fingers had lingered against hers, around the look in his eyes that wasn't just gratitude. It was something more, and for the first time in years, the thought of more didn't terrify her. It terrified her and made her feel more alive than she had in a decade. Upstairs in his room at the far end of the hall, Preston sat by his window, watching the trees sway in the wind, watching the shadows move across the garden. His thoughts tangled between grief and hope, between guilt and something that felt suspiciously like joy. When did this happen? He asked himself. When did she become this important? The morning started quietly. Maya padded barefoot into the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon already curling through the air. She had decided to make French toast crispy at the edges, just how Eli liked it. She cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them with a sprinkle of nutmeg, a dash of vanilla. The rhythm of it soothed her, familiar, safe. She barely heard Preston enter until his voice floated in behind her, softer than usual. Didn't know breakfast could smell this good. She glanced over her shoulder. He wasn't in a suit, just jeans and a navy t-shirt. His hair still a little damp from the shower. His tie hung loose around his neck, like even he had forgotten it was there. Maya grinned. You mean smell? Preston leaned against the doorway. No, I meant what I said. It sounds good. Like comfort. She rolled her eyes, laughing. You're getting sappy. He shrugged, but the smile that tugged at his mouth was real. On the counter, the baby monitor crackled softly. A faint whimper. The shuffle of small feet against carpet. Maya reached to untie her apron. I'll go. But Preston stepped forward and gently touched her wrist. His fingers were warm, steady. Let me. She blinked, surprised, but nodded. This was his moment, and she wasn't about to take it from him. Preston walked upstairs, slowly, purposefully, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel afraid. When he returned, Eli was tucked against his chest, small arms wrapped around his father's neck, his face half buried in Preston's shoulder. He wasn't crying, just sleepy, comfortable. Preston set him gently in his booster seat at the kitchen island. Good morning, buddy. Maya greeted softly, sliding a plate of French toast in front of him. Look, your favorite. Eli didn't speak, but he picked up a piece of toast with his fingers dipped it in syrup and began munching quietly. Preston helped him with the syrup. Careful, gentle. His movements weren't perfect. The toast got a little too soggy. But none of that mattered. It wasn't about the toast. It was about this presence. Set. Midway through breakfast, there was a knock at the door. Preston frowned, not expecting anyone. When he opened it, a woman stepped inside. Petite, sharp-eyed. Her silver-framed glasses caught the morning light. Dr. Lydia Chen, Eli's longtime developmental psychologist. She'd known Eli since he was 2. Still smells like expensive silence in here, she joked lightly, stepping inside. Preston chuckled. Not for long. Maya offered her a glass of water and led her to the sunroom, where Eli was now stacking wooden blocks by the window. Dr. Chen knelt nearby, observed quietly. Preston hovered in the doorway, hands tightening just slightly. Dr. Chen hummed softly after a few minutes. Focused. Grounded. She turned. That's new. Preston stepped in. You see progress. Dr. Chen nodded. Not just in behavior, in attachment. He's bonding. He's trusting. Preston glanced at Maya. His eyes softened. Dr. Chen noticed the exchange. Her lips twitched. Tell me, Miss William, she asked, adjusting her glasses. What exactly are you doing differently? Maya hesitated. I treat him like he's already whole, not broken. Dr. Chen studied her. Long, careful. That's rare. Maya smiled softly. It shouldn't be. After the session, Dr. Chen pulled Preston aside in the hallway. You've done more than hire help, she said quietly. You've invited something sacred into this house. Don't lose it. Preston's gaze followed her words back toward the sunroom, where Maya knelt beside Eli, showing him how to sign happy with her hands. Eli mimicked her, not perfectly, but close. Preston swallowed hard. I won't lose her, he whispered. Not if I can help it. Sob. That afternoon, Maya needed space, not because anything was wrong, but because sometimes when life shifts this big, this fast, you have to sit somewhere quiet and let yourself believe it's real. She walked the garden alone. The chameleons were blooming thick with pink and white petals. The scent of fresh grass floated through the air. Maya sat on the bench. Let her shoulders drop. Let her mind breathe. This was supposed to be temporary, she thought. A job, a paycheck, nothing more. But somewhere between the soft sound of Eli's giggle and the way Preston looked at her like she was the first person to really see him in years, it had become something else. Her hand slipped into her pocket. She pulled out an old photo, faded at the edges. Her mother, her little sister, sitting on a porch swing. Her mother's head tilted back in laughter. Her sister's hands caught mid-sign, spelling out the word love in the shape of her fingers. Maya traced their faces. I still carry you, she whispered, even now. Behind her, footsteps approached, soft, hesitant. She turned. Preston stood there, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile on his lips. I hope I'm not interrupting. Maya tucked the photo away, smiled. Just thinking. He walked over, sat beside her, not too close, not too far. I've been meaning to ask something. Preston started, then paused. Why did you take this job, really? Maya tilted her head. Because I needed to remember who I was. And maybe I could help someone do the same. Preston nodded slowly, like her answer wasn't a surprise at all. And you? She asked. Why did you really hire me? He looked down, kicked at a stray pebble with his shoe. Desperation at first. I was exhausted, out of ideas, out of hope. Then he looked up, met her eyes. But then, I saw how Eli looked at you. Not scared, not shrinking, just still, safe. A silence stretched between them. soft, full. I owe you an apology, Preston added. For what? For how I treated you when you first arrived. I I dismissed you, made assumptions. Maya smiled, no malice in it. You thought I was just a maid. He winced. Yeah. She held his gaze. Steady. Calm. People do. All the time. But you're not. She shook her head. No. I'm someone who sees people that others overlook. Preston exhaled. You saw him. And now I see you. The air shifted. Delicate. Dangerous. Something between them cracked open. Something neither of them could name. Not yet, but soon. Part 8. The Language of Music and Memory. That evening, as the sun spilled its last bits of gold across the estate, Maya walked past the study, heading toward the kitchen. But something made her pause. Music, not through a speaker, not digital, real, hesitant piano keys, slow, careful. A melody unsure of itself, but familiar, full of memory. She turned. Inside the study, Preston sat at the old upright piano, his back slightly hunched, his fingers moving over the keys with a stiffness that said he hadn't played in years, but also with a tenderness that said he'd never really forgotten how. Maya stood in the doorway for a long moment, just listening. When the last note drifted off into the quiet, she stepped inside. I didn't know you played, she said softly. Preston chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. I used to. Emma, she loved this thing. Made me promise I'd teach Eli one day. Maya stepped closer, eyes gentle. Then, keep that promise. He glanced up. You think he'd care? Music speaks, she whispered, even when we don't. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, Preston shifted on the bench. Would you sit with me? Her heart thudded. She hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. She slid onto the bench beside him. Close enough, their shoulders brushed. Close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne, something warm, woodsy familiar now. Preston began again. Slower this time. A lullaby. Something simple. Something soft. Maya, without even thinking, began to hum along. Then her hands moved, signing the lyrics. Eli's lullaby. Her hands danced in the air, smooth, graceful, her face soft with memory. Preston's fingers slowed. His eyes weren't on the keys anymore. They were on her. You're extraordinary, he said quietly. Maya blinked. Her hands stilled. Her throat tightened. I'm just present, she whispered. Most people aren't. For a long-waited second, they didn't move. Then gently, Preston reached out. His fingertips brushed the inside of her wrist. Barely a touch. More a question than anything else. Maya didn't pull away. It was an answer. A yes, a maybe. A we'll figure this out together. And then, Dada. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. A small voice. Fragile. Breaking through the silence that had gripped this house for years. Dada. Both Preston and Maya froze. It echoed down the hallway like church bells in the quiet. Preston shot to his feet, nearly knocking the piano bench over. Maya was right behind him, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Together they raced up the stairs. Yay. Eli sat upright in bed, small hands gripping the edges of his blanket. His eyes were wide. Not frightened, just uncertain. As if he wasn't even sure what had come out of his mouth. Preston dropped to his knees beside the bed. Say it again, he whispered, voice shaking. Please, buddy. Just one more time. Eli blinked. His lips parted. He looked at Maya standing behind his dad, then back to Preston. No words came this time. Just a tiny hand. Reaching. Resting against Preston's chest. It was enough. Preston pulled him into his arms. Held him like he might fall apart if he didn't. His voice cracked as he whispered over and over. You did it. You did it, buddy. You did it. Maya stood there, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes burning, her heart so full it hurt. She didn't speak, didn't intrude. This moment belonged to them. But oh, her soul was singing. The next morning, the house didn't feel the same. It wasn't louder, it wasn't filled with noise, but it was alive. Warmth floated through the halls. Light caught in the window panes in a way it never had before. Even the staff moved differently, as if they could all feel it, even if they didn't know exactly what it was. Preston canceled every meeting on his calendar. Family day, he told his assistant. Non-negotiable. He spent the entire morning with Eli, building towers from plastic bricks, reading picture books in the sunroom, making silly faces until Eli giggled. Not a full laugh, not sound even, but the expression, the light in his face. It was enough. Maya stayed close, not hovering, not directing, just present, offering snacks, wiping sticky hands, singing softly when Eli started to fidget. And every time Eli glanced her way, he smiled, small, fleeting, but smiles nonetheless. Around noon, a familiar figure stepped through the front door. Dr. Lydia Chen. She hadn't been scheduled to come. Preston had texted her 3 words the night before. He said Dada. She stepped into the foyer, her sharp eyes scanning the scene like a detective walking into a miracle. You weren't kidding, she murmured after watching Eli play for 5 minutes. His eyes, they're clearer. His whole everything. Preston nodded. Maya was there when it happened. Dr. Chen's gaze turned to Maya, then back to Preston. That doesn't surprise me. She pulled Preston aside. You know, she said quietly, this changes everything. You'll need to reconsider long-term care, adjust routines. His progress may accelerate now. I want you to lead it, Preston replied. But only if Maya stays involved. Lydia arched a brow. She's not a therapist, Preston. Preston didn't flinch. She's something better. She's someone he trusts. Lydia studied him, then nodded. Fair point. That afternoon, Maya walked back to the garden, needing space again. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because her heart was too full. She sat beneath the magnolia tree, let the wind play with the ends of her braids. Watch the clouds shift across the blue. She should be happy. Eli had spoken. Preston was changing. Everything was changing. But beneath the joy was something else. A tremor. A question. Was she growing roots somewhere she wasn't meant to stay? Behind her, footsteps. She didn't turn this time. You always end up here, Preston said softly, stepping beside the bench. Whenever you're thinking. I like the quiet, Maya murmured. So do I. He sat down, close but not too close. I was thinking, he said, glancing her way. We should celebrate. Her eyes flicked to his. Celebrate? Yeah. Something small. Just dinner. Tonight. You, me, Eli. Maya's breath caught. That sounds lovely. Preston smiled. And tomorrow? There's something I want to show you. She tilted her head. Oh. It's something personal. About Emma. About where this all started. The mention of his wife made the air shift. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. Preston, you don't have to. I want to, he said, looking straight into her eyes. You've given so much to our home, to my son. I want you to know where this really began. Part 9. The story behind the walls. That evening, dinner wasn't elaborate. No fancy chefs, no catered trays, just something simple. Something intentional. Grilled salmon, roasted asparagus, mashed sweet potatoes. Preston cooked. Maya set the table. Eli picked out the napkins, 3 different colors. Blue for Maya, red for himself, yellow for Preston. It was the first time Maya had seen him make a deliberate choice that included her, and it mattered more than words could. They sat at the table together, laughter weaving in and out of quiet conversations. Eli didn't speak not with words, but his eyes danced between them, watching, listening, smiling. After dinner, they moved to the fireplace. Preston poured glasses of wine, just half for Maya, like he somehow knew her boundaries without asking. Eli curled up with his stuffed bear on the rug, content to play quietly with a toy train as the adults talked. "I used to sit right here with Emma," Preston said softly, settling onto the couch. "This exact spot. When we first bought this house, we couldn't afford to furnish most of it. But we had this fireplace and a secondhand record player." He smiled, eyes distant. "She used to sing to Eli every night, even when he wouldn't respond, even when the silence felt endless. She never gave up." Maya's throat tightened. "You remind me of her," Preston added suddenly. His voice didn't shake, but it softened. "Not because you're alike, but because you love with the same kind of stubborn depth." Her breath caught. "Preston, I'm not saying it lightly," he interrupted, shaking his head. "I don't know where this is going, but I know what I feel when you're near. And I know how Eli changes around you." Maya looked down, heart pounding. "I feel it too." She didn't mean to say it, but it was the truth. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "So am I," Preston whispered. For a long time, neither of them said anything else. The fire cracked. Eli's toy wheels clicked softly against the hardwood. It didn't need to be filled with words. Yet, later that night, long after Eli had drifted to sleep, Maya stood in her room, staring at the ceiling, unsure if the trembling in her chest was fear or hope. A soft knock echoed against her door. Her breath caught. She opened it. Preston stood there. No suit, no shield, just him. "I couldn't sleep," he said, voice almost a whisper. "Me neither." He didn't step forward, didn't cross the threshold. I wanted to say thank you," he murmured, "for helping me find him, for helping me find myself." Maya smiled, soft, gentle. "Good night, Preston." He nodded. "Good night, Maya." And he walked away. She closed the door, leaned her back against it, exhaled a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, and that was how everything truly began. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains in waves of gold. The house felt different, not like it had before, stiff, sterile, filled with the kind of silence that weighed like grief. Now it felt soft, alive. When Maya walked into the kitchen, Eli was already there, sitting on the counter, sipping orange juice. Preston stood beside him, spatula in hand, attempting badly to flip scrambled eggs. Maya laughed. "Didn't peg you as a breakfast guy." Preston shot her a grin. "Desperate times. You're burning them. I am not. You are." Eli giggled, not with sound, but his face lit up, his hands covering his mouth. Maya walked over, gently, took the spatula from Preston, and expertly folded the eggs. He threw his hands up. "Fine, fine. I surrender." As she plated the eggs, Preston leaned against the counter, watching her with that same soft, unreadable gaze, the one that made her stomach flip in ways she didn't entirely approve of. "I was thinking," he started. "Uh-oh," Maya teased, pouring Eli's juice. He chuckled. "I was thinking, maybe it's time." "Time for what?" "To take Eli to the park." Maya blinked. "The park?" "Yeah, Piedmont Park. I haven't taken him anywhere in years. But I think maybe it's time." Her hands paused mid-pour. "That's a big step." Preston nodded. "I know, but I want to try." The outing wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be, and maybe that's why it worked. Preston packed the collapsible stroller. Maya grabbed a tote with snacks and wipes. Eli refused to go without his baseball cap, which he pulled so low it nearly covered his eyes. The car ride was quiet, calm. Jazz hummed low from the speakers. Eli watched the city slide past through the window, his fingers tracing shapes in the fogged glass. When they arrived at the park, the world opened up: green grass, sprawling trees, the distant sound of children laughing, couples walking dogs, runners pounding the pavement. Families sprawled across picnic blankets. Preston spread out a blanket beneath a tall oak. Maya unpacked apples, crackers, and juice. Eli curled beside her watching everything. Preston pointed to a group of boys tossing a baseball. "Hey, buddy, you want to try?" Eli's eyes followed the game. His fingers curled tighter around Maya's sleeve. Maya smiled softly. "We can just watch for now, sweetheart. Maybe next time." Eli nodded, rested his head against her arm. And for Preston, watching his son choose closeness instead of fear felt like winning a war he hadn't known how to fight. A voice called from across the field, "Mr. Caldwell." Preston looked up. A woman jogged toward them. Athletic, sunglasses, running gear. "Rebecca Thorne," she said, pulling off her shades. "We met at the Chamber of Commerce dinner last year." Right? Preston nodded, polite but guarded. Her eyes flicked to Maya, then down at Eli. "Oh, this must be your son. I heard. Well, I'm glad to see he's doing okay." Then her gaze slid back to Maya, a quick flicker of judgment disguised as curiosity. "Your new nanny." Preston's entire posture shifted. His spine straightened, his jaw tightened. "No," he said firmly. "This is Maya William. She's part of our family." Rebecca blinked, covered her surprise with a tight smile. "Oh, well, that's nice." She didn't linger, offered a wave. "We should catch up soon." As she jogged away, Maya busied herself adjusting Eli's hat, pretending she hadn't heard. But her chest tightened. Her ears burned. Preston sat down beside her, silent for a beat. "I'm sorry about that," he murmured. "You don't have to be," Maya said quietly. "No," he insisted, turning fully toward her. "You deserve more than to be seen as someone who just works for me." Maya met his gaze. "Preston, I don't need validation from strangers. I know who I am." His eyes softened. "I wish everyone had your clarity." Eli leaned against her side, fingers tracing circles on the blanket, and for a little while, they just sat together, a family, whether the world understood it or not. Part 10. A family no longer defined by blood. That evening, the sunset dipped lower than usual, painting the walls of the estate in deep gold and soft lavender. The air felt heavier, but not in the way it once did. It was the kind of heaviness that came when something was changing, when something old was finally breaking open to make room for something new. Preston stood by the large window in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. His gaze wasn't on the drink. It wasn't even on the sprawling view outside. It was on the photo album sitting on his desk, the one Emma had started, the one he hadn't opened in years. When Maya knocked softly and stepped inside, she immediately noticed it. Her steps slowed, eyes softening. "Is that?" Preston nodded, motioning for her to sit beside him on the leather sofa. "This," he said, his voice low, "was Emma's idea. When we found out we were pregnant, she started this. One photo a month. Every milestone. And then, after she passed, I stopped adding to it." He opened the album. Page by page, memories unfolded. Emma smiling, her belly round and full of life. A tiny newborn Eli bundled in a hospital blanket. His first steps. His first messy attempt at feeding himself. His fingers tangled in Emma's hair as she read him bedtime stories. But then, the photos started fading. Not physically, but emotionally. The smiles grew thinner, the light dimmer. "This is the last one," Preston murmured, pointing to an image of Emma holding Eli under a maple tree, her face radiant despite the IV line taped to her arm. 2 weeks before she died, Maya's fingers brushed the edge of the photo, careful, reverent. She loved him so much. "She did?" Preston whispered. "She really did." He stared at the image for a long time, his thumb pressed against the corner, like if he just held it tight enough, it might pull her back. "I failed her," he admitted quietly. "I shut down. I buried myself in work. I pretended that if I just stayed busy enough, the grief wouldn't find me." Maya shook her head. "You were surviving. You were doing what people do when the world falls apart." His eyes met hers. "You helped me live again." Silence followed, but not the empty kind. The sacred kind. The kind that wrapped around them like soft wool. "I've been thinking," Preston finally said, his voice steady. "I want to formally hire you." Maya blinked. "Preston, you already did." "No, not as a housekeeper. Not even as a caregiver." He reached across the desk and pulled a manila folder forward. "As Eli's developmental guide. Permanently. Officially." Her eyes widened. That's huge." "It's not generosity, Maya. It's necessity. You've done more for him than anyone in 2 years. Hell, more than anyone ever has." She swallowed hard. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept." Maya bit her lip, then lifted her chin. "I will, on one condition." Preston's brow lifted. "Name it." "That we do this together," she said, her voice steady but warm. No titles, no distance, no lines drawn between parent, therapist, caregiver. Just team. Preston's gaze softened. "Deal." They shook hands. Then Preston didn't let go, not immediately. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. His eyes held hers. There was something electric in it, gentle but undeniable, and neither of them pulled away. Not this time. Just before Maya stood to leave the study, Preston called her name. "Maya." She turned. He stepped forward, not rushed, not hesitant. And then he pulled her into an embrace. It wasn't romantic. Not entirely. It was something older than that. It was recognition. It was "I see you." And in that quiet space between grief and hope, between what was and what could be, Maya allowed herself to believe. Believe that she belonged. That the following morning started with a knock. Not the gentle kind, a sharp echoing rap. It stirred something cold in Maya's gut. Preston appeared. Seconds later, his brow creased as he strode toward the front door. Maya, holding Eli against her hip, followed, her heart thudding. When Preston opened it, 3 figures stood outside. A man in a tailored gray suit, clipboard tucked under his arm, flanked by 2 others. One in business casual, the other in a sharp blazer with an earpiece. The clipboard bore a gold insignia, Child Welfare Services. "Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Caldwell." The man greeted professional but firm. "I'm Marcus Fielding. We've received a report of possible neglect concerning your son, Elijah Caldwell. We're here to perform an assessment." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop. Maya's arms tightened around Eli as his little hands trembled against her shirt. Preston stepped outside, pulling the door halfway closed behind him. His voice was calm, deadly. "This is absurd. Who filed the report?" "I'm afraid we can't disclose the source during the initial evaluation," Marcus replied. "May we come in?" "No," Preston snapped. "Not until I speak with my attorney." "You have that right?" Marcus nodded. "However, if you deny entry during a welfare check, we'll be forced to escalate. A court order can be requested." Maya stepped forward, her voice clear but steady. "He's safe. I've been with him every day. There's no neglect here." Marcus glanced at her. "And you are Maya William, his full-time caregiver." One of the agents jotted something quickly into a notebook. Preston's nostrils flared. He turned on his heel. "Give me 5 minutes." He disappeared into the office, already dialing his lawyer. When he returned, the change in him was palpable. Cold, controlled, ready for war. "You may enter," Preston said, "but under observation. Nothing is to be touched without consent." The agents walked inside. Their gazes scanned the grand foyer like they were stepping into a crime scene. Maya stood firm still, holding Eli. Preston stayed close, his presence sharp and protective. The agents checked the pantry, the nursery, the backyard. One agent requested to speak with Eli alone. "No," Maya said immediately. "He doesn't speak with strangers. He has autism. I'm his comfort, his voice. You can ask, and I'll translate, or not at all," noted Marcus said quietly. When it became clear there was nothing to find, Marcus closed his folder. "This visit was protocol," he said. "But—" "Off the record, Mr. Caldwell. It's rare we see a child this well cared for. Whoever submitted this complaint may have had other motivations." Preston's jaw tightened. "I know exactly who." When the door closed behind them, Maya's knees felt weak. Eli trembled against her. Preston reached out his hand on her shoulder. "They're not getting near him. Or you. Ever again." She nodded. "I believe you. Because this wasn't just a job anymore. This wasn't even just family. This was a fight, and they were in it together." Part 11. Built in the fire. That afternoon, the house felt like a war room. Preston called an emergency meeting in his office. Inside sat Maya, his attorney, Sandra Griffin, a sharp, silver-haired woman whose presence could silence a courtroom, and Lionel Hatch, a former federal agent turned private security consultant. Lionel exuded calm the way most men exuded tension. Preston paced jaw tight. This wasn't random. Someone tried to weaponize child welfare against me. Lionel tapped his tablet, pulling up a digital map of communications data. "I traced the breach to an old assistant, Sylvia Warner, terminated 6 months ago." Sandra's brow arched. "And someone forgot to revoke her access." "Correct," Lionel confirmed. "She used it. Cross-referenced your personal calendar with internal files." Preston's hands clenched. "And who's she with now?" "Lark Technologies." Lionel answered, tapping a photo. "And engaged to Greg Sinclair, their COO. Preston's eyes narrowed fury, sharpening every word. So this wasn't just corporate sabotage. It was personal. "Very," Lionel agreed. "The welfare report was step 1. Step 2 is already in motion." Sandra leaned forward. "A quiet injunction. They're claiming your acquisition of one of their subsidiaries involved coercion." Preston slammed his hand onto the desk. "This is a shakedown." Maya stayed silent, but sat straighter. Her fingers tightened together until her knuckles turned white. "They're not just coming for your business," Lionel said, voice low. "They're coming through Eli, through Maya. They're trying to rattle you." Preston's fists tightened. "Then we rattle back." Sandra nodded. "We go public. We file a countersuit. Emotional trauma, defamation, abuse of government agencies for corporate warfare." Lionel tapped the desk. "But understand, it comes with risk. They'll dig deep into everything, including Maya." The air thinned. Preston didn't hesitate. "Then let them." Maya looked at him, stunned. "Preston?" "No," he interrupted, locking eyes with her. "I'm not letting them drag your name. You're part of this family now, and I protect my family." Her throat tightened. "Even if they find something." He reached across the table, laid his hand over hers. "Even then?" She blinked rapidly, fighting back the sting in her eyes. Lionel glanced between them, but said nothing. His face softened, just slightly. Then it settled. By nightfall, the news cycle exploded. Headlines screamed across every screen. Caldwell Dynamics files countersuit child welfare used as corporate weapon. News anchors speculated. Bloggers debated. Comment sections erupted. Some called Maya a hero, others a gold digger, a manipulator, a maid with a plan. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Friends, strangers, numbers she didn't recognize. One message stood out. A private number. I know what you are. He'll find out too. You don't belong there. Her hands shook. Preston found her sitting on the back stairs phone in her lap, staring at the message like it had weight. His face darkened the moment he saw it. Give me the phone. Preston. No. Give me the phone. She handed it over. He scrolled, jaw clenched. Then without another word, he forwarded the number to Lionel. We end this, Preston said quietly. Today. That evening, Maya sat on the porch swing, her knees pulled up to her chest, watching stars blink to life. The cool breeze tangled in her braids. Somewhere inside, Eli was tucked into bed. Safe. Preston stepped out, 2 mugs in hand. He offered one without a word. She accepted. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Preston exhaled. I used to think I could fix everything with money. Turns out, the things that matter most can't be bought. She stared at her cup. No, they have to be fought for. Yeah, he murmured. And you fight harder than anyone I've ever met. Her throat tightened. Do you ever regret bringing me into this? Preston's head snapped toward her. Never. Silence stretched. Then he reached over, took her hand, slowly, intentionally. Because you brought me back to myself. Maya blinked, hard. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say you're welcome. She just held his hand tighter. That night, the 3 of them, Preston, Maya, and Eli, slept under the same roof, not as strangers in a storm, but as something else, something stronger, a family, fragile, found, but real. The courtroom was colder than it should have been. Maya sat beside Preston, at the defense table, hands folded tightly in her lap, her back straight, her jaw set, her breath shallow but steady. Around them, reporters, photographers, curious onlookers hungry for scandal. At the bench, Judge Adeline Monroe adjusted her glasses and rapped the gavel once. This court will now hear Caldwell Dynamics versus Lark Technologies. Sylvia Warner sat smugly in the front row. Her diamond ring caught the light like a blade. Beside her, Greg Sinclair wore the smug detachment of a man who believed everything could be negotiated. Preston leaned over to Maya, whispering, They expect you to flinch. She didn't look at him, but her fingers brushed his knee. Just once. I won't. Testimonies began. Lionel took the stand, first his voice crisp, clean-cutting. He outlined the unauthorized access, the stolen calendar, the weaponized welfare call when the opposing lawyer tried to redirect. And what role did Miss William play in any of these corporate decisions? Lionel didn't flinch. None. She was a staff member. Her sole concern was the child's welfare. Then why, the lawyer pressed, did she continue to involve herself in matters beyond her professional scope? Before Lionel could answer, Judge Monroe held up a hand. Miss William, are you prepared to testify? Maya froze. Preston's hand closed over hers under the table. It's your choice. She stood, legs steady, voice stronger than she thought possible. Yes, Your Honor, I'm ready. The courtroom shifted, every eye pinned to her. She sat, raised her right hand, swore in, then told the truth about Eli, about the first day she heard him crying, about the moment she stepped into his room, not as an employee, but as a human who recognized another human in pain. She spoke about grief, about trust, about the language of presence, of showing up, of refusing to walk away when it would have been easier. And why, the opposing attorney asked, would a housekeeper insert herself into a matter so delicate? Maya didn't blink, because that little boy wasn't just scared. He was forgotten. And I know what that feels like. The courtroom went silent. Even Sylvia's smirk slipped. Judge Monroe regarded Maya carefully. "Thank you, Miss William," she said softly. "You may step down." Maya walked back to the defense table. Preston reached for her hand beneath it. He didn't squeeze it like a shield. He held it like a vow. "You were magnificent," he whispered. She didn't smile. "Not yet." Because the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Part 12. Victory that was never about winning. Outside the courthouse, the air pulsed with 1,000 voices. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved microphones toward anyone in a suit. Headlines were being written in real time. Maya William hero or opportunist. The maid who stood against a corporation. Is this love or a lawsuit? But inside the courtroom, silence reigned. Judge Monroe adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the courtroom before settling on the counsel table. Her gavel struck once. Clear. Sharp. "This court has heard extensive evidence from both parties," she began. "It is the opinion of this court that the claims brought forth by Lark Technologies are not only unfounded, but malicious in nature." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Furthermore, the judge continued, voice firm. "It is deeply disturbing that a private corporation would manipulate child welfare systems as a tool of corporate warfare. This court finds such tactics reprehensible." Sylvia's face went pale. Greg Sinclair shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Judge Monroe's gaze sharpened as it moved to Maya. "As for Miss Maya William, this court recognizes her actions not as interference, but as acts of moral courage. This court affirms that her presence in young Elijah Caldwell's life has been nothing short of transformative and essential." Maya's breath caught. Her hands trembled in her lap. "This court hereby dismisses the case with prejudice," Judge Monroe declared, "and issues a formal reprimand against Lark Technologies for abuse of legal process." The gavel fell. Preston let out a breath like he'd been underwater for hours. His hand shot to Maya's, gripping it tight. "You did it," he whispered. "No," Maya whispered back, her voice thick. "We did." Sylvia stood abruptly, storming out of the courtroom. Greg followed his mouth, drawn tight, his eyes flicking once coldly toward Preston, before disappearing into the crowd of reporters. The war was over. At least this one was. Shit. Outside the courthouse, microphones swung toward Maya the second she stepped onto the steps. "Miss William, how does it feel to be vindicated? Do you plan to continue working for the Caldwell family? Are you in love with Preston Caldwell?" Preston's hand touched her back, steady and protective. His posture blocked the worst of it. But Maya, she didn't flinch. She turned, faced the cameras. Her voice didn't shake. "I didn't do this to win," she said. "I did this because a little boy needed someone who wouldn't leave." The crowd stilled for just a breath, just long enough to hear something real. Then Preston stepped forward. "That's all for today," he said. "Respect our privacy." He guided her down the steps. Eli wasn't there. He was home safe under Mrs. Green's watchful eye. As they slipped into the waiting car, Preston caught her gaze. "You were incredible." Maya shook her head, a laugh breaking free. "I was terrified, and still incredible." That night, the house was quiet. But it wasn't the old silence, not the heavy grieving one. This was the silence of peace, of something whole. Maya sat on the couch, Eli curled against her, his small hand wrapped in hers. His eyes heavy with sleep, but fighting it like he just wanted to be near her a little longer. "You're still here," he whispered, voice tiny but clear. Her chest tightened. "Always." Preston leaned against the doorway, watching them, his eyes softer than they'd ever been. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled, his armor gone. When Maya tucked Eli in that night, he grabbed her hand and didn't let go until sleep won. She kissed his forehead, smoothed his hair, then stepped into the hallway where Preston was waiting. "I have something," he said quietly. She followed him into the office. On the desk, a document, heavy, official, her brows furrowed. "What is this?" Preston pulled the chair out for her, sat beside her. My will. Her heart stuttered. Preston, I'm naming you as Eli's guardian if anything happens to me. Her mouth opened, closed. She stared at him like he'd just said the sky was purple. Preston, that's huge. I know. She blinked back the sudden sting of tears. Are you sure? You think I'd trust anyone else? His voice softened. You're the only one who's ever seen him. Really seen him. And seen me. Her hands shook as they touched the paper. And what if they dig into me? What if they find something? What if I fail? Preston reached across the table, took her hand, laid it over his heart. Then let them, he said, because they'll only find the truth. Her breath hitched. And what's that? That you love him. His eyes didn't waver. And that I love you. Her whole world stilled. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a grand confession wrapped in fireworks or music. It was a truth. Simple, sacred. She started, swallowed. Preston, he squeezed her hand. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I just needed you to know. Maya looked down at their hands, at the warmth there, at the promise there. You're not the only one, she whispered. Not anymore. The next day, the ruling went public. Social media exploded. Maya William isn't just the nanny. She's the protector. She's the family he didn't know he needed. Not all heroes wear suits. Some wear aprons. Preston's office was flooded with congratulations. But the one call that meant the most came from Judge Monroe herself. She wanted to nominate Maya for the State Child Welfare Advisory Board. She has a voice this system desperately needs, Judge Monroe said over the phone. And if she accepts, she'll change more lives than just Eli's. When Preston passed her the phone, Maya was speechless. The offer was more than she ever imagined. A seat at the table, not as a maid, not as an observer, but as someone who could make real change, as someone who finally knew her worth. That afternoon, they visited a community center Maya had read about, a place for kids like Eli, underfunded, overlooked. Inside, children sat in circles, learning sign language, painting building. One little boy, 7, maybe 8, struggled with his hands trying to form the word home in sign. Maya knelt beside him, guided his fingers. Like this, she whispered. It means home. He grinned when he got it right. Preston stood in the doorway, Eli's hand in his, watching Maya, watching her become exactly who she was always meant to be. That night, back in the garden under the magnolia tree, Preston sat beside her. I've been thinking, he said. Oh no, Maya teased, nudging his shoulder. That sounds dangerous. He chuckled. I want you to stay. Her smile faded, softened into something deeper. I'm already here. No, Preston shook his head. Not just stay. I mean really stay. Not as staff, not as hired help. He turned, met her eyes, as family. Her heart stilled. Her voice trembled. You mean, I don't want a title between us anymore. No walls, no lines. Just us. Maya blinked against the sting of tears. Preston, I'm not asking for an answer now, he whispered. But I needed you to know that this you, me, Eli, this is the best thing I've ever built. She turned, resting her forehead against his, and whispered back, me too. In the months that followed, the headlines faded, but something else remained. A family, one built not by blood, but by choice, by hands that held on when others would have let go, by a boy who found his voice, by a man who learned how to listen, and by a woman who finally understood that sometimes the greatest stories aren't the ones you expect. They're the ones you fight for, the ones you stay for, the ones you choose every single day. The end.